Date to the Rescue, Do-Over Date Series, Book 4. By Susan Hatler. Chapter 1. My disastrous dating history has finally forced me to take drastic measures. In my early 20s, I dated guys who were fun and exciting. Has that led me to true love? Not even close. Now that I'm 26 years old, it's time to get serious and make some hard choices. I've had enough of dating guys who aren't stable. I'm ready for a man who is reliable, safe and secure. You know, someone who'd make a good husband. Someone who'd make a good father. Someone who doesn't make me want to pound my head against the wall repeatedly at the end of a date. My friend Krista is setting me up with such a guy, aka a blind date. His name is Tom. He's an accountant. Can't get much more stable than that career choice, right? I've learned that Tom likes home-cooked meals, so this is where the drastic measures come into play. I, Lucy Remington, am learning how to cook. My family would faint if they knew my plan. My brother hadn't nicknamed me Donut because of how sweet I am. To date, my cuisine credentials have included calling for takeout, habitually dining at an array of restaurants, and making anything in the realm of toast, bagels, or maybe macaroni and cheese if I'm feeling really adventurous. But if the way to a stable man's heart is through his stomach, then, hey, Lucy is on the job. Go, me! I wiped down my kitchen island countertop and then placed on the clean counter a bag of flour, half a jar of peanut butter, 5 soy sauce packets from Walk-In Roll, a jar of pickles, a bottle of mustard, 3 turkey slices, and a bag of chocolate candies, -2, or, 20. I itched to prepare my first home-cooked feast as a trial run, and these were the ingredients on hand. Not to sound too optimistic, but I felt pretty confident that my soon-to-be cooking talent would impress my blind date, which would finally lead me to true love. This should be entertaining, Lucy, Krista said, popping her booty up onto the Marble Island countertop and staring at the ingredients with a raised eyebrow. Her dark hair was pulled up into a ponytail and her freckled cheeks were still red from her soccer game this morning. Krista preferred outdoor exercise whereas I preferred the treadmill at the gym. Very funny, I said, smiling at my good friend, who I'd met through my lifelong bestie and roommate, Hannah Griffin. Hannah had roomed with Krista and our friend Abigail at UC Davis, while I'd attended Princeton. I'd been bummed not to room with Hannah in college, but my parents really wanted me to go to an Ivy League school, so I'd obliged. When my mom and dad bought me this new townhome 6 months ago, I was so excited that Hannah agreed to rent my spare room. Finally, we'd be living together and would get to see each other every day. Yeah, that didn't last long. In addition to my townhome, my parents had bought the identical townhome next door for my older brother, Blake. You could have knocked me over with a cheese stick when I found out Blake and Hannah had been harboring secret feelings for each other all these years, even while we were growing up, EW. Their feelings finally came to light after living next door to each other. Now, they were this sickeningly sweet couple who spent every day walking to work together and most evenings watching movies with takeout. Even though I barely saw my roommate, I did feel happy for Hannah. I mean, she's lucky. Blake is a responsible lawyer who will make a wonderful husband and father someday, unlike the last guy I went out with, who changed jobs as often as I changed designer outfits. Poor Krista had heard me complain so much about my most recent annoying dates with Sean, aka Mr. Unreliable, she decided to set me up with Tom, Mr. Responsible Accountant. Yay! Besides, I'm not cooking to entertain you, Krista, I said, giving her a meaningful look. This is to impress Tom. Interesting, she said, her gaze roaming over the ingredients. The problem is where to start, I said, staring at the food on my counter. I had to find a way to mix these ingredients together into a delicious meal. So stressful. I grabbed a chocolate candy and popped it into my mouth as a pick-me-up. I feel like something's missing. Looks like you've got the staples, Krista said, not that I could rely on her advice. Her cooking skills amounted to grilled cheese sandwiches, which, by the way, were delicious. Oh! I snapped my fingers, dashed to the shopping bag on the counter, and fished out the lavender apron with the pretty pink trim I'd purchased today. Tying it around my waist, I caught sight of myself in the dark reflection of the microwave. My brown locks hung past my shoulders, with the sides held back by bobby pins. I'd gone makeup-free so the steam from the stovetop wouldn't clog my pores. My brown eyes looked focused, making me feel ready to tackle the strange endeavor people called cooking. The apron completes it. Now I'm ready to bake. Or broil. Or whatever makes food into an edible meal. Very professional. Krista gave me the thumbs-up gesture. Now that you look the part, what will you be preparing for us this morning, Chef Lucy? I don't know the answer to that question. Yet. But your job is to be my test audience. My gaze flicked to hers as she hopped off the island and picked up the soccer ball she'd taken to the park earlier. Needing a guide who could help me mix my ingredients into something decent, I picked up my electronic tablet and scrolled through various cooking shows. Looking for a recipe? Krista asked, setting her dirty soccer ball on the island I'd just cleaned. Nope. I'm looking for a mentor, I said, moving her ball to the floor and wiping my hands on the apron. Then I skimmed through the cooking shows, skipping past any that seemed to be using a meat cleaver. Way too advanced for me, thank you very much. I tapped the arrow on my tablet. Maybe something pan-crusted with my sugar puff cereal. Krista laughed. Pan-crusted? Is that your new cooking lingo? I grinned over my shoulder. Did I use it the right way? How should I know? She shrugged, peering closer to my tablet. Let's watch that one. I clicked on a show called Twice the Spice, and an eccentrically dressed woman in her early 50s started talking about what she planned to cook during this episode, a Honduran twist on a classic Malaysian chicken curry with a secret ingredient, cinnamon. I immediately pressed the X button and kept scrolling through the available shows. Hey, Krista said, blowing out a breath. What's wrong with Twice the Spice? That dish sounded really delicious. Plus, the host had a certain exotic air about her I want to mimic in my next life. Sorry, but she's too advanced for my cooking expertise, I said, shaking my head. Then I clicked on a show called Cooking Basics 101 and flipped through the episodes. Or lack thereof. Krista laughed. I'm going for something safe and impossible to mess up, an omelet, I said, smiling at the image on the screen of my new mentor, John. Twice the Spice looked better, Krista said, picking up her soccer ball and juggling it over and over again on her thigh. At least she seemed like an entertaining lady, who wouldn't make us snooze in our souffle while we watched her show. Unlike this dude. I'm a beginner, Krista, I said, searching through the fridge for a carton of eggs. I hadn't purchased any, but maybe Hannah had gone to the store between smooches with my brother, so gross. Curry would be too much for me. Now we're going to keep it really simple today, said John, host of Cooking Basics 101, from behind the camera, as if he were reading my mind. Nothing complicated. Just straightforward and simple and even, dare I say it, a teeny bit tasty. John gets me. He's my guy. I blew a kiss to the screen, turned back to the refrigerator, and continued my search. Finally, I spotted an egg carton on the bottom shelf. Success! I took out 5 eggs, cradling them in my arm as I shut the door with my hip and then moved to the island. John understands what I need. She blinked at me. A teeny bit tasty? That's what you need? It's a start. I shrugged, thinking my friend didn't quite grasp my sheer lack of cooking skills. Keep in mind I usually have a slice of toast and a banana for breakfast. Sounds healthy. But it's not going to impress my blind date, I said, setting the eggs on the counter and then going after them as they started to roll away. Finally, I set the eggs on a hand towel. Stay. Krista burst out laughing. So entertaining. Anyway, John is presenting a straightforward, simple option that is a major step up for me. An omelet. I'm going to master that omelet if it's the last thing I do. Do you worry you're putting too much effort into this first date with Tom? She asked, biting her bottom lip. I'm starting to feel responsible for this interesting experiment. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that Tom likes home-cooked meals. Hey, I appreciate the tip, I said, following John's thorough, if maybe a smidge dry, instructions. I even managed to crack the eggs into the bowl with only a few bits of shell inside. I fished the shells out with my fingers. Shell bits are so gross. I need this upcoming date to pan out. No pun intended, I said, reaching for the salt shaker per John's instructions. The guys I've been dating are getting me nowhere close to love. I have to improve my cooking skills if I want to be with someone who... Whoa, Lucy! Krista lunged forward and snatched the white container out of my hand. Too much salt. Don't you worry about high blood pressure? For real? I tilted my head to the right. We're 26. Not 58. We don't need to worry about that yet. At least, I don't think we do. Look what you've done, she said, gesturing to the bowl with the egg goo. What? I peered into the bowl and spotted the mountain of white. Oops. I scooped out most of the white mountain with a spoon. Okay, we're good now. Make sure to season the eggs well. John's voice came through the tablet speakers. See? I poked Krista's shoulder and grinned. I seasoned the eggs well. I've totally got this under control. Cooking is easy. So, tell me, what's a whisk? Krista tucked her soccer ball under her arm and opened a drawer I hadn't used since my mom had stocked the kitchen with what she called necessities. Whisk, Krista said, handing me a utensil that looked vaguely familiar. Huh. I watched John's example of how to use it and followed suit. We can go ahead and heat our pan now, John said. We'll use low heat here, folks. Not too hot. We're going to cook the eggs nice and slow. Patience is the key to a good omelet. Go ahead and turn the burner onto a low setting. I squinted at the knobs along the edge of the stovetop. Turning the burner to low didn't make sense to me. I mean, the hotter you made the pan, the faster the eggs would cook. Why wouldn't I want the eggs to cook fast so I could be done cooking and eat already? I cranked the knob all the way to high, figuring I'd advance to basic cooking 202. Ha ha. Look at my dating life this way, Krista, I said, whisking the eggs around the bowl and starting to get bored. The whisking was overkill if you asked me. Way too much physical effort for something that will take me less time to eat than I'll spend making it. I moved on to plopping the butter into the pan. For way too long, I've been dating guys who are, if you will, like the item on a takeout menu with the chili pepper beside it. Hot and spicy. Okay, Krista eyed the sizzling butter with a slight degree of worry. Unnecessary worry, of course, because I totally had my pan under control. Admittedly, the guys are hot and yummy and taste oh, so good, I explained as I watched John pour the eggs into the pan. I followed suit and the eggs started sizzling. Was cooking really this easy? Besides the time wasted if using a low setting, making an omelet wasn't as hard as I'd imagined. Where was I? Hot and spicy guys, Krista said, keeping her eye on my omelet to be. Oh, right. I held up a finger and nodded. So, the problem is that the chili pepper guys catch my eye, but they don't show up on time to dates, don't have steady jobs, and don't make plans for the future. Lucy? Krista glanced at me and then at the eggs in the pan. That might be a little too hot. Oh, I know hot chemistry with a guy is important, I said, turning around to face her as the eggs sizzled just like I'd heard them do in the movies. I'm such a chef. I'm not saying a guy can't be hot, but it's time to look beyond the surface. To the healthy specials on the menu that women in their 20s often overlook, but not anymore. Krista shook her head. No, by hot I meant. I'm ready for some stability in my life, you know? I'm not getting any younger and it's time to think about what matters in the long run. I leaned against the counter and went to lick the whisk, but Krista snatched it out of my hand. Don't lick the whisk. Raw egg is not cake batter. I want a guy who is responsible and consistent, I continued, shrugging and watching her set the whisk in the sink. Then I held my arms wide. A guy who is on time for a date, knows how to balance a checkbook, and who owns socks and wears them. Is that asking so much out of life? I asked, dropping my hands back to my sides. Lucy? I'm not asking that he own a whole drawer full of socks, just a pair he can wear on a date, I said, raising my voice because the eggs were making a lot of noise as they souffled or whatever they were doing to get all yummy and omelet-esque. My last date showed up in flip-flops, Krista. It was winter in Sacramento and he showed up in flip-flops like it's Hawaii, or something. I know it isn't snowing here like in Tahoe, but I feel like a date to a fondue restaurant deserves sock wearing. Lucy! I'm just saying that when we go to a nice restaurant it's a little embarrassing when the hostess pulls us to the side and tells my date he can't go in because he's not wearing socks. But, I just don't want any more surprises is all, I said, my tone short and final. I'm absolutely, positively, and without a doubt done with hot and spicy. Out of nowhere, Krista grabbed my shoulders and whirled me around, pointing at the stovetop. Lucy, listen to me. The pan is on fire. My head flipped in the direction of the stove. I stared in shock as smoke billowed up from the pan and toward the high ceiling, triggering the loud wail of the smoke detector. I covered my ears. Oh, no. Had I tossed something in that pan besides butter and eggs? I couldn't recall. My immediate response to this emergency was to turn up the volume on John's Cooking Basics 101 show to try to discover where I'd gone wrong. How else was I supposed to save my omelet? John needed to tell me what to do. Help me, John. You're my only hope, I shouted, realizing I may have watched the 3 Star Wars trilogies one time too many. I mean, Han Solo was totally hot and spicy and that's why. This is not good, Lucy. Krista shouted, opening a window and urging the smoke outside as she started coughing. This is bad. Very bad. You haven't even tasted it yet. I called over my shoulder as I snagged a dish towel and began waving the blue cloth up at the smoke detector to clear the air as John rattled on about grabbing hold of my spatula, which was the last thing I wanted to do right now. How do you know the omelet is bad just because of a little smoke? You don't really think it's ruined, do you? All of that hard work. Now, pay attention here, John instructed as I coughed and waved smoke away from in front of my eyes so I could see him through the gray cloud. We're going to fold your omelet to reveal a yellow, fluffy, perfectly cooked exterior. I can save it, I said, to John, Krista, and as a silent prayer to my upcoming stable date. Putting a hand over my nose, I grabbed the spatula and flipped over half the omelet. Unfortunately, a black charcoal-like substance stuck to my spatula and dropped onto the stovetop with a tragic little plop. Was that my stick of butter? As if possessed, the gas range suddenly ignited when it caught a taste of my black-filled, and, unfortunately, probably ruined, omelet concoction. Orange flames shot up around my pan like wicked fingers that rose, slimmed, and then morphed into black smoke. "Do you think I can save it, John?" I asked, knowing that failure with this omelet represented hot and spicy chili peppers, with no socks, forever. As I panicked, the smoke alarm continued its incessant blaring, which was only slightly muddled by the sound of sirens growing louder from outside the window. "My omelet! My stable life! I've got this!" I stepped away from the growing fire. Was that my blue towel on the burner, coughing in the thickening smoke as I willed John to explain what to do if your omelet looks like toxic waste. But John ignored my crisis, practically mocking me as he started sprinkling parsley onto his finished product. "Whatever, John." Knock, knock, knock. Krista and I turned toward the door as someone knocked again. Probably my brother from the neighboring townhome. Blake would probably laugh that I'd so badly botched my first attempt at cooking. He and I used to watch the chefs at the country club make those delicious omelets right in front of us. They'd held the pan with one hand and flipped their omelets with minimal effort. How had they made cooking look so easy? This was a nightmare. Krista ran to answer the door. "Turn it off, Lucy! Turn it off!" I failed to see how turning Cooking Basics 101 off would help me at this point. Part of me was still hoping John would sense my distress and give me advice. I stared at the flaming, smoking mess on the stovetop with my hand over my mouth. The problem, obviously, was that I couldn't think with the constant wailing of the smoke detector. Grabbing a broom out of the closet, I climbed up onto the island and stood on wobbly legs, waving the broom back and forth like I was waving the white flag of surrender. Swatting at the smoke detector, I tried to clear the air around it, or break it. Either way was fine by me. "Ma'am," a male voice rang out, with an urgent tone. That was so not John from Cooking Basics 101, with his calm, "You can do this, you can cook a fluffy omelet," breezy Sunday morning tone. "Ma'am, please get down from there. It's not safe." The man's firm voice startled me so much that I wobbled, my heel slipping off the edge of the island. The next thing I knew, the air was underneath me. I screamed as I fell, but all I could think about was my omelet. How was I supposed to impress stable and secure Tom the accountant with a black, charcoaled omelet and 2 arms in casts? They say your life passes before your eyes before you die, and I can verify that they are absolutely correct. One bad date after another blipped through my brain as I fell backward, staring blankly at the smoke-filled ceiling. No socks. Late to the movie. No flowers on our 1-month anniversary. Disappointment after disappointment. And now, charcoal omelet and falling to my demise after my epic cooking failure. But I never hit the hardwood floor beneath me. Instead, a pair of strong arms, covered in a thick brown jacket, caught me, bringing me to an abrupt halt against his hard chest. Deep, forest green eyes peered down at me from beneath a large yellow helmet. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm not sure," I said, realizing I'd been rescued by one of the firefighters Krista had let into my home. As I stared into his handsome face, my heart pounded and my belly did a little flip, which meant a whole lot of trouble for my chili pepper-free diet. Chapter 2. Smoke swirled around me, the fire alarm blared, and some guy standing next to Krista shouted out instructions from the front door of my townhouse. But all I could do was stare up into the sexiest pair of green eyes I had ever seen. Talk about hot and spicy. Wow. "Excuse me, sir," Krista said, her voice sharp from just outside the front door. "That's my friend in there. You best believe I am going back inside." "We can't allow that, ma'am," the man said. "I'm going inside whether you like it or not," she said, her tone surprisingly hostile. "Lucy, I'm coming." "Ma'am, we have our best man inside bringing your friend out. Goodness, you're strong." The firefighter holding me looked down from beneath his helmet and smiled. That's me he's talking about, he said, winking at me. The best man. Let's get you to safety, all right? I nodded as he carried me in his strong arms out of the smoke-filled kitchen and past the hallway into the smoke-free living room. But the fire, I said, craning my neck to see past the man's fire jacket. I have to put out the fire. Whoa, there, Mr. Hot and Spicy Firefighter said, holding me tight. We'll take care of the fire. You just had a big fall and need to focus on your health. Did you hurt anything when you fell? I don't think so, I said, figuring my pride didn't count. I mean, thanks to you I didn't get hurt. My head might be like one of those eggshells on the counter if you hadn't come in when you did. Just doing my job. The firefighter chuckled softly and smiled, making me swoon right there in his arms. Let's take a quick look at you, all right? Yeah, sure. I nodded, thinking I'd like to take a quick look at him. Oh, wait. I was already doing that. Man, those green eyes were amazing. Were those brown flecks for real? He gently eased me onto the couch in my living room, but kept his hands on my shoulders as he leaned over and assessed my eyes. No concussion. That's good. A second firefighter hurried past us, dragging a long, thick hose from the front door over his shoulder. She okay, Jake? Seems to be. Thanks, Todd, the man holding me said. I cleared my throat, thinking I was far from all right. I seemed to be in terrible danger and it had nothing to do with the fire still burning on the stove. I liked the feeling of this man's strong, rough hands against my skin. I liked the way he leaned over me with his broad, muscular chest and how it made me feel protected and safe and secure. I liked the way he looked at me even when he was talking to the other firefighter, like he wouldn't be distracted from me. This was not good, Lucy. Not good. I'll see to it that she makes a full recovery, the firefighter said, looking down at me. Oh, I wasn't sure I could recover from this. I wasn't sure at all. He was that red chili pepper and I was supposed to be on a red chili pepper-free diet. I exhaled a quivering breath. I'll let you know when I've got it all under control, Todd called back as he dragged the last of the hose into the kitchen. The firefighter in front of me knelt and moved his hands to my forearms. What's your name? He asked, his voice calm and soothing. I couldn't exactly say the same for my heart, which was pounding hard in my chest. I tried to tell myself that it was because of the adrenaline from the fire, but I knew that wasn't the truth. It was this man's caring demeanor and brilliant green eyes. I'm Lucy, I said, lifting my lashes. Lucy Remington. Hi, Lucy, he said, the corners of his mouth lifting again. My name is Jake Bryant. Hi, Jake, I whispered, my heart still galloping away. Would you place your hands in mine, please, Lucy? He asked. He held out his hands and as my fingertips grazed against his warm skin, goosebumps skittered up and down my arms. That's good, he said, giving my hands a comforting squeeze. Now, if you could just follow my finger right here. I glanced at his finger and followed per instructions, before gazing into his eyes again. Surely this man was married or had a girlfriend or someone who adored him. I seriously needed to get a grip. I mean, the man probably thought I was lame for starting a kitchen fire. Although, he wasn't looking at me that way. Focus on my finger, he urged softly. As he moved his finger to the right and then to the left, he asked, So, Lucy, can you tell me what happened in your kitchen? Instinctively my eyes moved away from his finger and toward my kitchen. I caught sight of the last of the flames dying out before Jake's finger guided my face back to him. Don't worry about any of that, Lucy, he said, saying my name in a way that seemed so natural. All that matters is your safety right now. Can you tell me how the fire started? Oh, embarrassment. Well, I was cooking, I said, clearing my throat. Or at least trying to cook, if you know what I mean. Okay, he said, nodding. Then what happened? Well, John said to turn the burner on low. Wait, who's John? He asked, glancing around the living room. He's the host of Cooking Basics 101 and my mentor. I was watching his show on my tablet. His facial expression softened. Oh, got it. Go on. So, John said turn the burner on low. But I figured that the higher I turned up the temperature, the faster the omelet would cook. Right? Jake chuckled. If only life worked that way. Cooking takes patience, though. Yeah, I said, laughing a little. I guess I don't have much of that. The corner of his mouth lifted and I got distracted looking into Jake's eyes. I'm trying to get better though, I said, letting out a sigh. At cooking, I mean. I'm sorry you had to come out here for a small kitchen fire. I was going to put it out myself, but the alarm was so loud and I thought I'd take care of the smoke first and you almost got hurt pretty badly, he said, finishing for me. It's a call for help, Lucy. Sometimes you just have to drop the broom. I guffawed. Drop the broom. My new motto. It's a good one, right? He asked, brushing off his knees and standing upright. Well, Lucy. If you feel up to it, let's head outside and get some fresh air. I stood, wobbling a little, and Jake placed a steadying hand on my back. You okay? He asked. Almost dropped the broom, I joked. He smiled down at me, walking with me through my living room toward the front door. Well, aren't you just a little firecracker, Lucy Remington? Fire starter is more like it. I grimaced as we walked toward the sidewalk outside my townhouse where 2 fire trucks were parked along the curb. A tall, dark-haired firefighter with his arms crossed blocked the path of a red-faced Krista as she paced anxiously back and forth. There she is, the firefighter said, looking at Krista. She frowned up at him. I can go now, Lance? The firefighter checked over his shoulder. Yeah, just no storming into the townhome until we get the okay. Lucy! Krista shouted as she sprinted toward me. Are you okay? I was so worried. And someone wouldn't let me go in to check on you. I watched her check over her shoulder at the firefighter named Lance. I'm fine, I said, trying to ease her worry. Thanks to Jake, that is. Krista seemed to notice Jake for the first time as she patted down my arms and face, checking for bruises or burns. You look fine. But what took you so long? I may have crawled up onto the island when you left. Her mouth dropped open. You what? I was swatting at the smoke detector with a broom to clear the air. Lucy! And I sort of fell. Oh, no, she said, putting a hand to her heart. I can't believe you did that. But Jake caught me, I finished quickly. Krista looked Jake up and down as he helped me sit on the back of the fire truck. This very attractive man caught you? She asked, and then gave me the thumbs up sign behind his back as he reached for the first aid bag next to me. I shook my head and mouthed, hot and spicy. She flared her eyes just as Jake sat next to me. He glanced over at Krista. Just doing my duty, he said, turning back to me. His green eyes met my gaze and I shivered. A line formed between his eyebrows and he slipped off his jacket and placed it around my shoulders. Thanks, I said, even though I hadn't shivered because I was cold. Not like I was going to tell him that I found him hot and spicy. No way. I knew I should give him back the jacket, but I couldn't make myself do it. I fought the overwhelming urge to ask if he was single. How do you feel? he asked, turning to me. Warm. Gooey. Like I wanted to ask him out. I feel fine, I said, even though it was so not true. Alarms sounded in my head and I took this moment to remind myself I'd nearly burned the townhome down preparing for a stable date with a reliable guy. Krista moved behind Jake, pointed at him, and then mouthed, "Do you see the size of his biceps?" I gritted my teeth, hoping nobody had seen her. "You sure, Lucy? You look a little pale," he said, placing the back of his hand against my forehead. My belly did a little dance at his touch. I gulped. "I'm really fine, Jake. Thanks for your concern, though." He knelt in front of me. "Let me take your blood pressure just to be sure you're all right." "Okay," I said, trying to ignore Krista's gestures from behind his back. She mouthed, "He's so sweet." "Talk to him." "Go away." I shout-mouthed back with a frown. She shook her head and crossed her arms over her chest. "No way," she mouthed. As Jake inflated the cuff, I knew I needed to distance myself from my growing interest in this guy. "So, Jake, your job is pretty dangerous, right?" He shrugged. "It's not boring. A stable job at the same desk with the same hours and the same routine is fine for some people, but not for me. I need more spice, you know?" I gave Krista a pointed look as Jake read my blood pressure. No matter how much I was attracted to him or how I couldn't stop staring into his eyes, nothing changed the fact that he was exactly the kind of guy I needed to avoid. Jake pulled the cuff off my arm and smiled. "A little high, but that's to be expected." "Because he's so hot," Krista mouthed, and then started fanning her face. Lance," I called to the firefighter who had kept Krista from running inside my townhouse to me. He peeked around the other truck. "Yeah?" "Krista just said she wants to see how the hose works," I said, a feeling of victory stretching through my chest. "Would you mind showing her?" "In detail." "Sure thing." Lance nodded and waved Krista over. She hesitated, narrowing her eyes at me. But then she left. I did my best to keep from cheering. "All right, Lucy," Jake said, packing up his bag. "What have we learned today?" I'd learned 3 things. 1. Jake Bryant was very hot indeed. 2. Krista was right, he did seem very sweet. 3. There was no way I could ask him out. I sighed, looking up at him and wishing things could be different. "Drop the broom," I said. He reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Drop the broom." "Alrighty, folks," a male voice called from inside the townhouse moments before the firefighter named Todd reemerged. "Fire is out. Breakfast is not served." I buried my face in my hands. I'd failed at my first cooking attempt and I wanted to ask this hot and spicy firefighter out. So what had I really learned? An omelet was too challenging for me. I should have started with a bowl of cereal. Chapter 3. They say if you don't succeed the first time then try again. I mean, it's not like I could get worse at cooking. So what do I have to lose? Or at least that's what I kept asking myself as I lugged my groceries into the kitchen for my second attempt at cooking. Hannah, Krista, my brother Blake, and I had spent the rest of yesterday cleaning the kitchen to the best of our ability. My parents surveyed the damage and promised to hire a crew to repaint the kitchen, including the cupboards. Then they took us all out to dinner. Although I felt focused on mastering a home-cooked meal for my upcoming date, I hadn't stopped thinking about Jake Bryant since I'd met him yesterday morning. I'd forced myself not to purchase a chili pepper at the store, too, no matter how badly I wanted it. I set my grocery bag onto the countertop and started taking out the contents, including bright red peppers, a juicy orange apricot, a bag of flour, a bag of grapes, and leafy green lettuce. After an entire day at work and then grocery shopping, I now had to unpack my groceries and then cook a meal. How do people have the energy to do this? I was itching to order takeout and about to cave on that desire when my phone vibrated in the back pocket of my designer jeans. I pulled it out, checked the cell screen, and then tapped on an email from Tom. Hey Lucy. I'm looking forward to our date next Thursday. Sorry, I wasn't available this week. But I'll be back from the Cincinnati Accounting Conference next Wednesday. By the way, I called into work and spoke with Krista today. She's really been talking up your cooking and says it's, and I quote, on fire. Can't wait to try it. Have a good week. Tom. I widened my eyes and reminded myself to lecture Krista the next time I saw her. I glanced at the black remnants still visible on the wall behind the stove and then returned my gaze to my cell screen and typed back. Hey Tom. No worries. If you want to push the date back to Friday or even after the weekend, then that's no problem. You'll probably be tired from traveling anyway. See you soon. Lucy. Let's face it, I needed all the time I could get to master a home-cooked meal. That much was obvious, especially if you asked the fire department. Though I was starting to fear that even an extra week wouldn't be enough time to get my cooking skills up to par. Sigh. As I put away the groceries, my phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't an email. And it wasn't from Tom. The incoming caller ID for the phone call read, Sacramento Fire Department. Hello? I answered. Lucy? This is Jake Bryant. From yesterday. Hi, Jake, I said, my tone sounding way too enthusiastic. I cleared my throat and tried to lower my voice when I said, What can I do for you? I'm conducting a checkup call to make sure everything is all right on your end, he said, and there was a long pause. With, the house, I mean. I bit my bottom lip. With the house? Right, he said, his voice raising an octave. You know, with the beams and the rafters and the molding and all that. Is everything, good? I couldn't stop myself from grinning. He sounded nervous and I found it adorable. My beams and rafters and molding and all that seemed to be doing just fine, I said, covering my mouth to keep from giggling. Is there any other reason you called? Am I that obvious? Jake asked, pausing again. I imagined him closing those brilliant green eyes and pinching the bridge of his nose. Actually, we don't usually conduct checkup calls. I grinned. You don't say. Truthfully. I've been thinking about you, Lucy, he said, his voice dropping several octaves on my name. I'm calling to ask you out. I would love to go out with you. My mind immediately thought about Chili Peppers who didn't wear socks and how they weren't moving me forward in life. But I can't, I said, with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Can't? He asked, sounding disappointed. Do you have a boyfriend? I twisted my mouth to one side. No. That's good news, firecracker, he said, letting out a chuckle. You had me worried there. So, you're single. Good. Let me take you out to dinner. I really can't, I said, wanting to kick myself. Every part of me wanted to say yes, except this tiny voice in my brain kept whispering, You've tried hot and spicy, which has gotten you nowhere. You're not getting any younger. I wanted to smother that inner voice. Sigh. Look, you're such a nice guy, Jake, I said, dreading what needed to be said. I feel like I should be honest. If I'd met you 2 weeks ago, then I would have said yes to going out with you. You're sweet, funny, and I like you. All good things, he pointed out. Why do I sense a but coming? But I inhaled a deep breath, determined to think about my future. You're not my type, I answered, grabbing the bag of red peppers to put away. Not your type? He asked, and I pictured the mischievous grin on his face. Nope, I said, shaking my head and feeling a knot form in my belly. Not at all. Not even a tiny bit. Complete opposite of what I'm looking for, actually. So, what is your type? He asked, seeming unperturbed by my rejection. Grabbing a large, green jalapeno, I stared at it for a second before shoving it under a bag of flour. I'm looking for a kitchen staple type, I answered, patting the bag of flour. He chuckled. A kitchen staple? That's your type? I pouted indignantly at his laughter. Yes, I said firmly. Reliable, hardworking, easy to find when you need him. Dry, tasteless, unmemorable, he rattled off. Useful, I countered. You can't have a cake without flour. But you won't want a cake without icing. I bristled and pulled out the jalapeno from underneath and studied it. Why flour, Lucy? He asked, his tone holding humor. No one in the history of the universe ever said, wow, the flour in that cake was just to die for. Have you ever had such delicious flour? How was I supposed to argue with that? I'm sorry, but that's what I need. Go on a date with me, Lucy. I sucked in a breath. No, Jake. Really, go on a date with me? Absolutely not. One date, he insisted. I already have a date, I confessed, thinking about the homemade dinner I needed to prepare. And that date isn't with you. It's with the flour? I squeezed a grape until it popped between my fingers. Gross. Yes, actually. A date with steady, reliable, good-for-me flour, thank you very much, I said, shoving the bag of grapes into a refrigerator drawer. And I'm cooking a meal for him, and my cooking obviously needs work if I don't want to mess things up. So I really have to be going. Wait a minute, he said, his tone incredulous. You're cooking a meal? I paused in front of the fridge and frowned. Yes. He chuckled. I was just at your house yesterday to put out a kitchen fire. I know, I admitted. Should I come over in case you start another fire? He asked, and I pictured a mischievous, irresistible, so bad for me grin on his face. No, I said. You'll distract me while I'm learning to cook. Now I really have to go. Then I looked down and noticed the loaf of bread I was holding that I'd almost crushed in my hand. I wanted to say yes to Jake. It took everything in me to resist that hot chili pepper. Lucy. Let me teach you how to cook, he said, simply. My eyes widened as I stared at the bag of flour. You know how to cook. I'm a fantastic cook. My mom taught me. I rubbed my forehead. I don't know. There's no downside to taking advantage of my help, he said, his voice taking on an excited tone. You get to impress the flour, you'll learn how to cook, and if you burn down your kitchen again, then you have a professional on site to put out the flames. Win, win, and win. I hesitated. And it wouldn't be a date? Nope. Definitely not a date. Say it. Definitely, absolutely, and without a doubt not a date. I sighed and relented. Okay then. That would be really helpful, actually. Stupendous. I'm hanging up now, Jake. See you soon, firecracker. I ended the call and started tapping my forehead against the stainless steel refrigerator door. "Who was that?" Krista asked, walking into the kitchen. "I didn't hear you come in," I said, snatching a spoon from the drawer, opening a cupboard, setting the spoon on the shelf, and then closing the door. "Front door was unlocked," she said, giving me a weird look. "So, who were you on the phone with?" Okay, I was stalling. "Lucy, what in the world?" she asked, walking over to the cupboard, opening it, and taking out the spoon I'd put there next to a half-gallon of milk. "Why did you put the spoon in the cupboard? More importantly, why isn't the milk in the fridge where it's supposed to be?" Had I done that? Oh, no. I had Jake on the brain instead of focusing on the task at hand. Excuse, I needed a good excuse. Yeah, I had nothing. She put the milk away, opened the freezer, and then immediately started laughing. "Are you planning on making bell pepper smoothies for Tom?" she asked. "What? No. Is that a thing? Would Tom like that?" She stepped aside far enough that I could make out the bag of red bell peppers on top of a carton of mint chocolate chip ice cream in the freezer. Definitely not a thing I've ever heard about. Krista shook her head and grabbed the peppers. When she opened the fridge, she crooked her finger toward herself, urging me closer. I came over to her in front of the open fridge. "What now?" I asked. "Do you see this?" She pointed from shelf to shelf. "There's granola in the butter container, peanut butter in the crisper, and a brand new frying pan in the meat drawer. What in the world is going on with you?" My cheeks heated. I was a bit distracted, I guess. "Cilantro in the silverware drawer? Is that where you and Hannah are keeping it now?" she asked, before bursting out laughing. She faced me and crossed her arms as I smiled sheepishly. "Lucy, this is a mess." I nodded at Krista and sighed. "You're telling me?" Yes, I definitely made a huge mess because I had just agreed to cooking lessons with Jake. Time alone with that hot and spicy guy who rescued me from falling and cracking my head open. One-on-one attention with those green eyes. Big mistake. Big mistake. And I knew it. Chapter 4. It's not really a date. "He's just doing me a favor," I said to Krista for the umpteenth time. Then I picked up a jar containing some kind of yellow liquid from her living room floor and read the label, "No pain, no gain." I turned to my friend. "Is this yours?" "What's it for?" "Huh?" Krista glanced over her shoulder, groaned, and then came to inspect the jar. "It's Missy's bikini wax." "Missy Peters your new roommate?" Krista gave me a look. "Temporary new roommate. It's just while she's looking for a place to buy here in Sac. And she's a slob. That's why I invited you over here today, to help me clean, so I don't go ballistic on her when she gets home. Missy roomed with Hannah during her freshman year at UC Davis, right? I remember Hannah saying she's a bit messy." "You think?" Krista gave me a faux shocked look. "She's waxing her legs on my living room couch, Lucy, while watching Grey's Anatomy. Messy doesn't begin to cover it." I shuddered. "I'll stick with a razor, thank you very much." "I don't know," Krista shrugged, taking the jar from me and examining it. "I'd be willing to try waxing. There's something to be said about longer-lasting results." "Sounds like what I want for my love life," I said, tossing a size small pink hoodie into the laundry basket and remembering that Missy is a former supermodel. "No pain, no gain? The new motto for the pathway to true love?" Krista asked, raising an eyebrow. "More or less." I laughed, realizing how extreme that sounded. But it did feel extreme sometimes. And lonely. Take me, for example. I'm learning how to cook properly, which is oh so painful. Yeah, I was there when the fire department rushed into your townhome, remember? Exactly. I gave her a smile that was all teeth and then wiped up some expensive-looking anti-wrinkle cream that had oozed onto the carpet. I recapped the tiny gold jar and set it on the coffee table. I think it's obvious from the kitchen fire how far I'm willing to go to find the right person. Sounds like a smokin' good idea, Krista joked. Har har, I said, rolling my eyes. I continued picking up the tornado of clothes Missy had strewn across the living room. No pain, no gain, if you want longer-lasting results in the relationship department. I mean, where has dating hot and spicy guys gotten me? Single at 26. That's where. Hey, don't knock 26 and single, Krista said, lifting a neon blue lacy string of material that must be her temporary roommate's idea of underwear. Don't forget, I'm in the same singles boat. I know, I said, turning to Krista with an apologetic glance. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being single. But you love dating and meeting new people. I'm exhausted by the entire process of trying to find the right person. I want to be married someday and sometimes it feels unlikely to work out for me. Krista threw me a sympathetic look. You just need to be patient, sweetie. Like you're being with Missy? Touché. I sighed. Maybe I'm just one of those gals who will live alone with 10 cats and no family. You're an amazing person, Lucy. Krista stopped cleaning and put her hand on my arm, giving it a little squeeze. You'll meet the right person when the right time comes. I immediately pictured Jake's beautiful green eyes and his mischievous smile. I bit my lip, trying to focus on what's realistic. Maybe the right guy is the accountant you're setting me up with. Maybe. Tom is totally a great guy if you don't mind the serious type. Krista picked up a pink silk skirt from the floor and tossed it into the laundry basket. Or maybe the right guy for you will be that firefighter. You need to be open to all possibilities. The same way you're open to having a messy apartment? I gave Krista a look and she shook her head. Right. I didn't think so. What I need is to try dating a new kind of guy. I nodded, confirming the logic in my plan. You need to lay down the ground rules with Missy. I need to learn how to cook to make a good impression on Tom. Maybe you're right about talking to Missy, Krista said, letting out a long breath. But she's never taken instructions well. This won't be a fun conversation. Just like learning to cook won't be fun for me, I said, even though I immediately realized that wasn't necessarily true. Part of me was very much looking forward to Jake's tutoring lesson. This room is good. Let's move to the bathroom, Krista said, carrying the laundry basket and a garbage sack down the hall. I followed Krista into the bathroom she shared with Missy and spotted a scene that made the living room disaster look neat and tidy. An array of designer necklaces spilled off the edge of the counter, pulled in the center of the sink, and hung from various doorknobs. A row of various pink candles, ranging from midnight rose to dawn lily, lined the bathtub ledge. Bottles of mascara, blush compacts, tubes of lipstick, and more shades of eyeshadow than I knew existed were scattered here and there and everywhere. It looks like a magic unicorn exploded, I said. Krista's eyes widened and she tilted her head. You know that feeling when you eat too many cupcakes at once because they're so delicious? I nodded. Well, that is what it's like living with Missy, she explained. She's fun. But it's way too many cupcakes for my belly. And she's only been here 3 days. Krista slipped past me and pointed to a pink soap in the shape of a heart that was stuck to the side of the bathtub. Can't we just have soap in a dish like a normal person? Doesn't seem like too much to ask. I nodded, taking a step forward and then realizing I was standing on the edge of a pink tulle skirt tossed haphazardly on the floor. I moved to the side, avoiding a bottle of hairspray that sat on the white tiles for some unknown reason. But then again, finding a nice guy who fits with me doesn't seem like too much to ask either. I need my bathroom back, she said, throwing her hands up in frustration. She sniffed at the unknown contents of a pale pink ceramic jar that said live, life, love, and then she promptly sneezed. In fact, I need my apartment back. I can't live like this for another day. So what's the plan? I asked again, leaning against fluffy pink towels I assumed were not picked by Krista. Krista scooted some candles over and then sat on the edge of the tub. I don't know what to do, Lucy. I really don't know. I moved a heart candle and then sat down next to her. You're going to have that awkward conversation with Missy. That's what you're going to do. You're right. I know you're right. She shook her head, gazing around her bathroom with a defeated expression. I'll do something I don't want to do and you'll do something you don't want to do, go grocery shopping. Yep. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen, avoiding Krista's gaze. I have to be there at 5 actually. You're leaving now? Before the bathroom is clean? She asked, her voice rising a little. Does the grocery store now close at 5 o'clock and nobody told me? Well, that's not why I have to be there at 5. I focused on my phone, scrolling through cooking shows, passing kale with Gail and then clicking on the cute picture of the host for Twice the Spice, trying to avoid Krista's questioning gaze. After the omelet debacle, I'm done with John from Cooking Basics 101. The Twice the Spice host is my new mentor. Good plan, she said, looking over my shoulder. Then she quirked her eyebrows. Wait, if the grocery store isn't going to close at 5 o'clock, then why do you need to leave now? Oh, I'm meeting someone there, I said, watching the host of Twice the Spice describe some spices she found on a recent trip to Haiti. Someone? Krista asked, her tone suspicious. Who is someone? I braced myself. Jake Bryant. She gawked at me. The firefighter who rescued you from your kitchen island free fall? Yes? I cringed and then let out an audible sigh. It's not a big deal. He offered to teach me how to cook. That's all. I knew I sensed chemistry between you two. Krista jumped up, clapped her hands and proceeded to do a little dance. Lucy has a date with the hot firefighter. It's not a date, I protested, standing up and stacking a few of the eyeshadow cases. We're just buying groceries to make a stir-fry. He's going to teach me, so I can make a good impression on Tom. No big deal. Krista sagged against the wall and clutched her heart. A super smoky hot firefighter is teaching you to cook? That's so romantic. No, it's practical, I said, shaking my head. Not romantic at all. She laughed. How is meeting up with him not the very definition of romance? Date to the rescue will be the title of your story, dreamy sigh. I shook my head and moved to the doorway. No, it's 100% non-romantic. He has a super dangerous job and I'm looking for steady and reliable. You know that. Whatever you say. She smirked as she picked up a few mascara tubes before turning to me. Thanks for your help picking up the apartment. I really do appreciate it. You're welcome, I said, slipping my phone in my pocket. Good luck on your talk with Missy. Thanks, she said, holding eye contact with me. Good luck with your shopping trip. No big deal, I said, trying to act nonchalant. The truth was that I was looking forward to this cooking lesson with Jake, though. Way more than I was looking forward to my real date. Chapter 5. I arrived at the grocery store, put my car in park and pulled down the visor to look in the mirror. As I reapplied my lip gloss, I told myself that this touch-up didn't mean anything. Just like it didn't mean anything when I ran my fingers through my auburn locks, wishing I'd taken the time to brush my hair before I left. But it was hard to convince myself that the nervous flutter in my belly didn't mean anything. Shaking off the worry, I checked my purse to make sure I had everything I needed. 1. A shopping list organized alphabetically by store section. 2. A thorough list of questions I wanted to ask Jake, including exactly how much is a pinch of cinnamon, and do I want my pasta al dente or not, and what in the world does seasoned to taste mean. 3. A French to English dictionary because everything good in cooking seemed to be French-related, and 4. A series of pens I pre-assigned to color code my notes. With my well-stocked purse in hand, I strode through the sliding doors of the supermarket and looked around. A few seconds later, I spotted Jake Bryant and my heart skipped a beat. Jake looked good. His short, brown hair that had previously been messy and smushed by his helmet was styled in a casual tousled look. Instead of a uniform, he wore a crisp, white polo shirt and jeans that hugged him in all the right places. He looked spicy, but not the kind that burned your tongue, and didn't wear socks to a nice restaurant. He looked like the kind of spicy you wanted to taste more of. I shook my head and reminded myself to focus. I was here to get groceries so I could learn how to make a home-cooked meal for Tom, a nice, stable and reliable accountant who would make my life simple for a long-term relationship. I was not here to admire Jake, who was holding a fruit I had never seen before. His gaze was focused on an employee with a green apron, who was talking enthusiastically to him and gesturing to the fruit repeatedly. As if sensing me staring, Jake turned in my direction and his green eyes locked with mine. The corners of his mouth lifted and he paused a moment as if taking me in. Then he waved me over and seemed to thank the employee for his help. I picked up a basket from the stack and weaved past various fruits and vegetables until I was standing before him. He immediately pulled me into a hug that felt both casual and important at the same time. My eyes drifted closed and I breathed in the spicy scent of his cologne, remembering how it felt falling into his arms when he rescued me. Then I told myself what I had been mentally repeating the whole ride over: this is not a date, this is not a date, this is not a date. So good to see you again, he said, giving me a wide grin. And you smell nice, too. A little less barbecue-y. I laughed. I returned that fragrance right away. He chuckled, making his face light up. You ready for this? He asked. I nodded. Ready. Good. Me, too. Come look at these first, he said, wrapping his arm around me and guiding me toward a bin containing bright pink fruit. What do you think? I've never seen anything like them, I said, picking one up and studying its rubbery pink leaves that ended in pretty green tips. What are they? Dragon fruit, he said, piling several into the basket he held. In Vietnam, I've been to markets where you practically wade through these beauties. I looked up at him in surprise. You've been to Vietnam? I've been all over, he said, grinning. My mom has taken me along with her to India, Chile, Malaysia, Brazil, Greece, Australia, and more. I still try to travel with her at least once a year when I can. So, you're a firefighter who likes international travel to exotic places, I said, finding the way he talked about his mom very sweet. The only problem? I was looking for a man whose greatest threat was a paper cut and whose ideal vacation location was San Diego. Man, you're going to love these when you try them, he said, kissing one of the fruit. They're magical. A little sweet. A little sour. Super creamy. Super yummy. Here, put a few more in your basket. Wait, hang on, I said as he loaded up 3 more. These aren't on my list. His eyebrows rose as he paused, holding more dragon fruit that he was apparently bringing to my basket. "You have a list?" he asked, sounding genuinely confused. I opened my purse, pulled out the shopping list, and held it up for him to see. "Of course. Here is the list." He put the dragon fruit back and his eyes skimmed the long, detailed sheet of paper. Then the corners of his eyes crinkled and he peeked over the top of the sheet. "That's quite a colorful list. It's good to be organized." I shrugged casually. "You said we were making a stir-fry, so I went to a few different websites, cross-referenced them, and made a list of what seemed to be generally agreed upon ingredients for a satisfactory stir-fry dish." He nodded slowly, handing back the list. "Lucy," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I appreciate the work that you put into that list. Very impressive, B. Don't say but." "Okay, however," he said, the corner of his mouth hitching up. "We don't need to restrict ourselves to arbitrary lists." He gestured with his hand to the entirety of the produce section. "This entire section is our list, Lucy. The only items required are the endless possibilities. Face it. There's no adventure in a list." "Yes, but there's organization and efficiency, and those get you the results you want." "Cooking isn't about efficiency," he said, shaking his head. "Cooking is a flavor journey. You have to enjoy the ride. If we want to put dragon fruit in our stir-fry, then we put dragon fruit in our stir-fry. Even if it's, shocker of shocks, not on the list," he said, grinning. "No, no, no." I shook my head and grabbed a dragon fruit that rolled off the pile and I pushed it back up to the top. I didn't. His head turned as another dragon fruit toppled down the pile. "See," I grunted, putting down my list to catch the fruit. My arms were filling with the beginning of an avalanche of pink and green fruit. Dragon fruit. Jake's eyes bulged as I quickly wedged one dragon fruit against the side of the bin with my leg to keep it from falling, before I continued speaking. "In any of the recipes," I finished my thought, right before the whole mountain collapsed. "Oh, no. See?" He laughed and easily gathered up all of the fallen fruit in his muscular arms. He arranged them back in place without a single one tumbling down. "The fruit is excited you're going to work with them. They're showing you lots of love." "Maybe they are attacking me for not following the list," I said, batting my eyelashes and pointing to my multicolored bullet points. "You win, Lucy. Maybe it's a little outside the box for your first go at a stir-fry," he said, snatching my list. "How about we start with," he glanced down the list, and fingered his chin. "Broccoli. Sound good? We'll save the dragon fruit for the second time." "Second time?" I asked, stopping in place as he walked over to the line of green vegetables. "Or the third if you're not ready then. I'm a very patient man." "Did you say a third time?" My belly did a little flip. I couldn't deny the thought of seeing him again and again would be very appealing. I mean, the lessons would be very appealing. "Yeah, that's what I meant. Look at the bright side." His green eyes sparkled and he shrugged. "Cooking should be easy for you compared to grocery shopping." I totally hoped he was right. Chapter 6. 20 minutes later, I offered to carry some of the groceries as we left the store to walk to Jake's place. But he shook his head and scooped up all the recyclable totes and slung them over his shoulder like sacks of potatoes. As we walked, we chatted easily and then I spotted Courtney Carmichael with her coffee cart just up the street. "Let me buy you a coffee to thank you for your help," I said, wanting to do something to show my appreciation for his tutoring time. "Courtney's coffee is the best in town." "Lead the way," he said, smiling, despite the burden of carrying all the groceries. Courtney Carmichael's coffee cart is her do-over in life. She'd worked 24/7 as a lawyer for 2 decades until her husband left her, saying she neglected him. All she had were material possessions to show for her many hours at the office. She told me she realized her priorities had been out of whack and that relationships were now her focus. She liked to wear fun tops to remind herself that life is about enjoying yourself. I thought she was super enlightened. "Hi, Courtney." I waved as we approached and she wiggled her fingers back at me. "We'd like 2 of your fabulous lattes," I said, smiling at her. "Coming right up," she said, grinning at me more than usual as she kept looking between Jake and me. She clearly had the wrong impression. I opened my mouth to tell her that when she said, "I hate to say I told you so, Lucy." But I did. "I definitely told you so." I squinted at her. "I'm not following." "I told you that you'd find someone wonderful if you were just a little more patient," she said, nodding at me as she ground the coffee beans for our drinks. "He looks like a good one, too. You seem happier than I've seen you in a long time." "I'm Jake." He reached out and shook her hand, wearing an amused grin. "I hear you have the best coffee cart in Sacramento." "Well, thank you, Jake." She wiped her hand on the tiny black apron at her waist before shaking his hand and turning to me. "Your boyfriend has good taste." I shook my head and held my hands up. "We're not dating." She looked back and forth between the 2 of us in surprise. Then Jake put his arm around my shoulder, pulling me against him. My belly did a little flip. Okay, being this close to him wasn't exactly awful. I inhaled a spicy scent. What kind of cologne was he wearing? Because, yum. "You're seriously trying to tell me you 2 aren't dating?" Courtney asked, waggling her finger and giving me a look like she didn't believe me. "Lucy's humor is one of the things I love most about her," Jake said, and then he kissed the top of my head. "But, she's right. This isn't a date. We're actually on our way to cook a stir-fry together right now. No dragon fruit." Courtney clutched the cinnamon shaker to her heart and sighed. "How romantic." No," I said, forcing myself to wiggle out from Jake's enticing embrace. "Not romantic at all. He's just teaching me how to cook. This is like a private tutoring session. So, I'm treating him to a latte for helping me." "He's teaching you how to cook?" Courtney squealed, bouncing on her heels. "That's even more romantic than the 2 of you just cooking together." I noticed a mischievous twinkle in Jake's green eyes, and my stomach did a cartwheel. He knew this was supposed to be a platonic thing. So, why did he have to act so adorable at Courtney's obvious mistake? "There's truly no romance here," I said, trying my best to clarify the situation. "We just finished grocery shopping together." "I wish a man would do the grocery shopping with me." Courtney grabbed a cup from under the stand. "I can just imagine you 2 reaching for the same bottle of wine and your fingers grazing." Oh. "Did he rub his thumb over some fresh mint and insist you smell it?" No," I said, wrinkling my nose. "It's a grocery store. No one wants to be in a grocery store, let alone flirt there." "I like being in a grocery store. Especially with you." Jake lifted my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Although, I prefer Courtney's version for our next trip." "So sweet," Courtney said, grinning as Jake lifted my hand and gently kissed the top. My belly did a major flip. "How did you 2 lovebirds meet?" she asked. "It's an embarrassing story," I mumbled, my cheeks heating. Then I quickly added, "And we're not lovebirds, Courtney." "Seriously?" Huh, she said, giving me a look that said she clearly didn't buy it. Jake smiled down at me, and I really wished he would stop doing that. I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist those intriguing eyes, which were greener than all jalapenos, bell peppers, and cucumbers combined. Wait a minute. Did I just compare Jake to vegetables? What was happening to me? I'll tell you the story of how we met, Jake said, pressing a hand to his chest. I'm a firefighter. Anne. A firefighter? Courtney asked, letting out an excited squeak. Then she reached out and squeezed my forearm. Lucy, what did I tell you? Patience, patience, patience. Someone great will come along. The fact that he saves lives is a bonus. My jaw dropped. But we're not even. He performs a great service to his community, and he clearly likes you very much. Courtney winked at Jake, who then squeezed my hand, which I noticed was still intertwined with his. It scared me how natural I felt holding hands with him. Courtney, he asked, the corners of his mouth twitching. Could you possibly create a heart design in the foam of Lucy's latte? I think she needs a little optimism in her drink. Sure thing, Courtney said, winking at him. No, Courtney, I said, holding my palms up as she poured the foam into the paper cup. No heart. That's not necessary. A big heart, Jake said. The biggest you can make. Maybe she could design a spatula into the foam? I said, trying for something unromantic that would stop me from falling for this sweet, funny, spicy man. Right? Something cooking related, since that's why we're hanging out. Or maybe she could design an onion. Was there anything less romantic than an onion? I didn't think so. A heart will be just fine, Jake said, smiling. Courtney smiled back at him as she lifted the 2 coffee drinks and placed them at the top of the cart in front of us. On the house, she announced. 2 love lattes for the 2 lovebirds. My gaze landed on the 2 hearts designed into the foam, and I flung my hands around in frustration. We are not loved by, oh, no. In the flurry of my emphatic denial, I knocked one of the coffees off the cart and directly onto Jake's crisp, white shirt. The light brown stain spread from his chest all the way down to the waistband of his jeans. My hands flew to my mouth in horror. I am so sorry, Jake. I can't believe I did that. I didn't mean to. Lucy, calm down. He laughed and leaned down to rest his hands on my shoulders. It's a shirt, not a big deal. I have more at home, all right? I nodded, still feeling terrible. I'm still sorry. Forget about it. He straightened and pulled the polo shirt over his head, revealing a white t-shirt underneath. Courtney handed him a towel to dry himself off. I gawked at the way his t-shirt hugged his chiseled abs, and then Jake caught me staring, so I looked away. Besides, I only wore the polo shirt to impress you, he said. Impress me for a shopping trip? I asked, tearing my eyes away from his body. No, he said, grinning before giving me a wink. For our date. It's not a date, I said, yet again, but I did happen to notice that he was wearing socks, an improvement from the hot and spicy guys I'd dated in the past. I'll let you get back to your non-date then, Courtney said, handing us a second latte, with a heart, before she exchanged a look with Jake. But it's obviously a date. Then they both burst out laughing. Their laughter was apparently contagious, though, because I shook my head and rolled my eyes, and ended up laughing along with them. Chapter 7. My eyes widened the second I stepped inside Jake's loft in Old Sacramento. I'd been expecting a bachelor pad with dirty socks and week-old pizza boxes and maybe a roommate named Larry, who would be playing video games on the couch. But I was pleasantly surprised. Jake's loft was clean and modern, with exposed bricks and even a fire pole that extended up to his bedroom. On one side of the room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a view of the river and Tower Bridge. The vibe felt completely relaxed with a pool table and a big, comfy leather couch, and no Larry in sight. I found a bookshelf holding a surprising number of cookbooks as I wandered around checking things out, while Jake unpacked the groceries. I pulled out a bunch of books and heaved them onto the island countertop, despite his insistence that we wouldn't need them. Finally, we started preparations, and I was determined not to set anything on fire this time. Baby steps for me. Crossing fingers. That's not what the recipe says, I said, pointing my finger at the line for step 3 of the basic stir-fry and then glancing over at Jake, who stood across the kitchen whisking some kind of sauce in a bowl. Lucy, he said, dipping his pinky into the sauce and then glancing at me over his shoulder, why don't you set that book down and come help me? It says here that we only need 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne, I said, as the cookbook wobbled in my palm. Where are your measuring spoons? I started pulling open drawers along the expansive kitchen, looking for measuring spoons. A moment later, Jake came up behind me and gently closed the drawer I'd just opened. Just relax, he said, setting down his bowl. Stand right here. But we need the measuring SPO. Lucy, trust me, he said, turning me around so I was facing him. He squeezed my shoulders. We're not in a rush. I bit my lip, because his hands felt way too good on my shoulders. I hadn't realized how tense I was or how much I didn't want to botch a meal for the second time. But if we want to finish in the 30 minutes the recipe suggests, then we need to get through the steps on time. Time doesn't exist in the kitchen, he said, and then chuckled. The goal isn't to be done. It's to have fun. Just come here a second, all right? I grumbled my assent and he guided me over to the stovetop. He stood behind me with a hand on my arm and the other gesturing at the pot and the pan on the burners. Watch the color of the peppers as they saute, he said, pointing toward the wok at the back. Do you hear them sizzling? Sauté is French and I studied Spanish. Maybe I should pull out my French-English dictionary. Lucy, the pan, do you hear it? I listened for a moment. The rhythmic sizzling sounds reminded me of the kind that came from the kitchen at my favorite Thai restaurant. Maybe I could just buy takeout for a home-cooked meal with help version and maybe Tom wouldn't know the difference. What about the scent? Jake said, waving his hand over the steaming pan. Take a big whiff and tell me how you think it smells. I glanced over my shoulder at him, raising my eyebrow. For real? Go on. Wait, close your eyes first. Wouldn't it be a whole lot faster if we just found the measuring spoon and followed the recipe? I asked. Close your eyes, Lucy. The way Jake said my name sent goosebumps prickling along both of my arms. Shiver. Oh, man. I really did need to get a grip and remember this was not a date. Finally, I let my eyes flutter closed and held still. My eyes are closed. What next? I asked, inhaling a breath and discovering a peppery, sharp aroma wafting up my nose. Oh, yum. Do you smell the fresh ginger? He asked. I sniffed again, hoping he couldn't hear the grumble of my stomach. The ginger smelled better than anything I had ever attempted to cook, especially without that delicious burn-to-a-crisp scent my omelet had offered. For the first few months of its life, you wouldn't even know that the ginger was down in the dirt, growing slowly, patiently, steadily, he explained as his fingers brushed up and down my arms eliciting goosebumps. Then with plenty of sun and water and good, dark soil the root starts to grow, he continued and I got lost in his mesmerizing tone. Ginger doesn't grow according to a hectic, fast, want-it-all-now schedule. It grows for 8 to 10 months, just as fast or slow as it needs to until it's ready. I breathed in the intoxicating aroma and found myself leaning into Jake's touch. Wow, I said, meaning both the scent of the ginger and being this close to Jake. With him standing behind me, I felt the brush of his chest against my back and his breath against my cheek as he leaned over my shoulder. Definitely, wow. Look at the reward of our patience, he said. I opened my eyes and watched him grab the handle of the wok and then shift the sizzling vegetables back and forth. My body immediately warmed. Yum. Patience, I said, looking up at him. Possibly a growth area for me. You're perfect the way you are, he said, causing a shiver to run down my spine. The urge to turn around, lift onto my toes and press my lips to his overwhelmed me. Teach me something else, I said, to distract myself. Absolutely, he said, and showed me how to slice a zucchini. Then he dropped the slices in to join the rest of the sizzling vegetables. He turned up the burner and flames licked the sides of the wok. Then he set it back down on the stovetop. He grinned at me and placed his hand on my lower back as he led me to the island where he had been working on the homemade sauce earlier. Here's the cayenne, he said, sliding the spice container across the marble counter to me. Put some in and we'll taste it. I wrapped my fingers around the bottle, but then eyed the recipe in the cookbook at the edge of the island. Jake must have noticed because he sighed, walked around to the wobbling stack of cookbooks, and without a word ripped the open page out of the book. Now you won't be distracted. He winked at me as he crumpled it up and tossed it over his shoulder. Your book! I cried. You can't just rip a page out of a book. Aren't cookbooks expensive? That was from a Twice the Spice cooking show cookbook, which I know couldn't have been cheap. Not with the high ratings on that show. He waved his hand dismissively. We'll make a paper airplane out of that page later. What about the rest of the book, though? He shrugged and glanced around his loft before his eyes landed on the fireplace. He lifted his eyebrows up and down. I laughed and rolled my eyes. You wouldn't really do that. Only if you make me, he said, leaping onto the bar stool by the counter to sit next to me. Let's make something delicious together. You and me, Lucy. His joyous tone was infectious and I liked the sound of you and me. Okay, I could be more patient, especially for the sake of the rest of the pages in the cookbook. Hesitantly, I poured a tiny amount of cayenne into the bowl with the soy sauce, toasted sesame oil, lime zest, grated ginger, and a little bit of honey. I glanced at Jake for approval. The only way to know is to taste it, he said, giving it a stir with the whisk before handing the bowl to me. I dipped my pinky in and licked the drop before handing the bowl back to him. He did the same. What do you think? He asked. I smacked my lips and the corners of my mouth curved upward. I think we should add some more spice. He winked at me. Let's do it. Still afraid to mess up, I again added only a little. What do you think? Jake stirred, we tasted. You tell me. I grinned. More? He nodded. More. Bit by bit, I added more and more heat to the sauce as Jake and I laughed, smiled, and shared the whisk back and forth. After about 10 minutes of this slow, methodical process, I finally nodded. I think it's perfect like this, I said. Jake squeezed my hand and looked deep into my eyes. You're perfect, he said. My belly fluttered and I stared into those green eyes. My gaze dropped to his mouth, which looked soft and inviting. I leaned toward him, closer and closer, but then a strange pungent scent wafted up my nose. I suddenly froze. Do you smell something? Jake glanced toward the pan and immediately hopped off the bar stool. He dashed to the stove and grabbed the wok, moving it off the burner. I hurried over and threw my hands to my cheeks when I saw the blackened mess. It's ruined! I cried, throwing my eyes at the ceiling. We have to do it all over again. He slung his muscular arm over my shoulder and smiled despite the horrendous burnt smell. No, Lucy, sweetheart, we get to do it all over again. And with those words the anxiety lifted from my chest and I smiled, looking forward to cooking adventure number 2 with him. Chapter 8. As I got ready for work Monday morning, I noted that the trash can in my kitchen was filled with rock-hard cookies, mushy cookies that were uncooked in the middle, and, of course, burned cookies. Lots and lots of burned cookies. Sigh. But after many failed attempts over the weekend, I finally achieved success. Yes, I, Lucy Remington, managed to bake cookies that were edible. Well, with Krista's selfless dedication and help. So during my lunch break from work, I grabbed the plastic container of perfectly baked cookies and drove over to the fire station where Jake worked. As I walked toward the big, open garage doors, I viewed fire trucks gleaming from the bright Sacramento sun. I straightened my black pencil skirt, adjusted my silk blouse, and tucked my hair behind my ear, wishing I had remembered to spray on another splash of perfume. Lucy, right? A man said. I turned to find a firefighter cleaning the wheels of a truck. He squinted from the intense sunlight as he looked up at me. Yes, that's right. I took a step toward him as he wiped off his hand before extending it. I recognized him as the firefighter who was with Krista during the fire at my apartment. I'm Lance. He smiled before nodding at the cookies. You bring those for Jake? What? No, I mean, yes. But they're not just for Jake. They're for everyone, to say thank you for the other day. Awesome, Lance said, nodding. I mean, Jake's not special, or anything, I said, obviously babbling, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. I mean he is special, but not in that certain way. Although, he's sweet and funny and stuff, but not like special. Okay, so maybe he's a little special but in a friend way. My cheeks had to be blazing by now, as I grew more and more flustered under Lance's growing grin. I really wished I could turn into a cookie right now. A cookie would so not be babbling on like this. Is Jake, around? I asked, hoping to spare myself more humiliation. He sure is. Lance chuckled before cupping his hands over his mouth. Hey, Jake! I tapped the toe of my black heel as I waited and smiled sheepishly at Lance every time he glanced my way. So, he finally said. How's that strong friend of yours? I raised an eyebrow. Krista? He nodded. It was his turn to blush. She's fine, but... Lucy? Jake asked, his voice tinged with surprise. I turned around to see Jake standing at the open doors of the fire station. He waved me over, and I looked over my shoulder at Lance. I'll tell Krista you said hi, Lance. Thanks, Lance said, then ducked his head again. Feeling a little like a nervous schoolgirl, I made my way over to Jake. He shielded his eyes from the sun and looked me over from head to toe. I can't believe you're here. Are those cookies? He asked, wearing a wide smile. Yes, it's no big deal. I waved my hand dismissively to distract from the pink of my cheeks. Was there anything hotter than an already hot guy in a fireman's uniform? His gray V-neck t-shirt hugged the muscles in his arms and his suspenders held his pants, which were slung low on his hips. These are for you, I said, holding out the cookies before I started drooling on them. Then I added, they're for all of you, of course. Thanks, Lucy. He took the plastic container, staring at them as if he'd won the lottery. Did you make these yourself? I nodded. Wow, he said, and then paused. Do you have a few minutes before you need to get back to work? I checked the time on my phone despite already knowing my answer. Sure. Good, he said, waving his hand. This way. He led me around to the back of the fire truck where he climbed up and extended his hand down for me. I stared up at him from below. I laughed. Don't you have just a normal chair around here? Why would I sit in a normal chair when I can sit on a fire truck? He patted the red engine and then extended his hand again. Come on, I'll pull you up. I balanced a wobbly heel on the first rung and reached my hand up to Jake's. He gripped me tightly and then effortlessly pulled me up next to him. We exchanged a smile as Jake opened the plastic container. He took a big bite of a cookie, closing his eyes as he sighed in contentment. I held my breath. Good? Delicious. I suspected he was just saying that for my sake, but it made me smile nonetheless. Want one? He held out the cookies for me. I shook my head. No, thanks. Can't. He frowned. Can't or won't? I hesitated before answering. We were entering personal information territory. This was something I should be telling Tom, not Jake. But the earnest, eager look on his face and those sympathetic green eyes changed my mind. In truth, I've been too nervous to eat the whole day, I explained. I've been waiting for an email from a client who just received a graphic design from me. It was my first big solo project and I'm terrified he hated it. It's been forever since I sent in the work. Yet, no reply. He munched on his cookie contemplatively. Sometimes we worry too much about pleasing others, he said, giving a shrug. All that should matter is that you're proud of your work. I shook my head. But if the client isn't happy, then my boss will. Is your boss's name on the work? I paused. Well, no. He put a hand on my forearm. You're the chef, right? What you taste isn't necessarily what other people taste. So cook what you like. The rest will fall into place. I thought over his words as I swung my feet back and forth over the edge of the fire truck. Wait, he said after a quiet moment. How long has it been since you sent the email? I turned to face him. I forgot every time just how green his eyes were. To your client, he clarified. How long has it been since you sent the email? Oh, I said, biting my bottom lip. I sent it at 8 o'clock this morning. He stared at me for a minute and then reached over, took my hand, spread my fingers wide, and plopped a cookie smack dab in the middle of my palm as he started to chuckle. Lucy, it hasn't been long enough to be nervous. Eat a cookie. Okay, I said, biting into the chocolate chip cookie and giving a satisfied sigh. I wasn't any less nervous, but I did feel a little more comforted, which I knew had more to do with the man sitting next to me than the cookie. When I went over to Jake's loft that night for another cooking lesson, I was surprised to find the bookshelf empty. As I stood staring at the vacant shelf, he came over with 2 glasses of wine. Stop looking scared. You won't need a cookbook tonight, Lucy. I won't? I took a hearty gulp of wine for some liquid courage. You expect me to cook without a recipe? On my second lesson? You're the firefighter. We're going to be cooking a fine meal, but not with our heads, he said, tapping my temple gently with the pad of his index finger. Tonight, we'll cook with our hearts. I watched as he tapped a finger against my heart and butterflies went wild in my belly. Plus, there was no way he hadn't felt my heart rate spike under his touch. How embarrassing. This is the most important lesson I can teach you, he continued. You ready? I shook my head no. If there was a way to shake your head oh, no, no, and oh, I would have done that. Great. Jake clapped his hands together. Tonight Casa de Luke will be serving a grilled chicken teriyaki with a mango jalapeno salsa, rice, and steamed broccoli. Luke? I asked in obvious confusion. Lucy plus Jake, he said, before leaning forward to kiss me on the cheek. Think of it as our tabloid name. Our what? I asked, laughing aloud. In answer, he winked at me. Let's go to the balcony. Okay. After Jake taught me the essentials of starting a grill, like where the charcoal goes, how to light it, how long it takes to heat, we went back inside while the grates preheated and started my rice lesson. Cooking rice is all about patience, he said, coming up next to me by the stove. Something you clearly excel at, Lucy. Right. I elbowed him playfully for teasing me. We had already measured out the rice, washed off the starch, and prepared the pot with olive oil and salt. The water started boiling and we watched it side by side, with me feeling very aware of his hip against mine. Once we put this lid on and reduce the heat, we can't open it up again until the time is up, he explained, setting a timer. Unless you like mush with your grilled chicken. I'll be good, I promised as Jake covered the rice and twisted the knob. Great, he said, putting his arm around my shoulders as he was prone to do. I had to admit it felt rather nice. How could I not feel safe under those strong muscles? What's next? I asked. Let's go cry, he said. I swiveled up at him, worried that I'd upset him. Maybe it was wrong to have a wonderful guy helping you prepare for a date with another guy. What do you mean? He chuckled. Onions, Lucy. Onions. Oh, I said, putting a hand to my heart. Thank goodness that was all he meant. In fact, his nonchalance about my upcoming date made me wonder if this attraction, or whatever you call it, was all one-sided. Maybe he really was just giving me cooking lessons to be nice and because he liked to cook. The thought gave me a surprising knot in my stomach. I focused on making the salsa with Jake and didn't even think about the rice cooking behind us since that had a timer and all. We chopped the onion and then the cilantro and then the jalapeno with Jake giving me tips on how to hold the knife and slice each specific piece of produce. When we were done, Jake suggested that I wash my hands in the bathroom with the aloe vera soap to help with the burn of the jalapeno. It was in the bathroom that I checked my phone. What should cooked rice look like? When I returned, I glanced at the rice through the glass lid as Jake grabbed the mango and limes from the fridge. It looked sort of like what the website photo showed. In fact, it looked almost done. But according to Jake, it still had over half the time left. I told myself to be patient and waited for a while longer. We laughed and joked as we cut the mango for the salsa. Jake fed me slices and watched me lick the sweet juice off my lips. I couldn't help but do the same when he sampled some himself. We mixed the salsa for the chicken together and I told myself I wouldn't stress about the rice and how long it was taking because we were following the instructions. I'm going to wash my hands again, I said after taking another sip of wine. Jake nodded. I'll go check the grill. In the bathroom, I sneaked a peek at my phone. I did an internet search, glancing at some pictures and was sure that the rice was done. I'd already burnt food twice around Jake didn't and I didn't want to burn the rice for a 3 strikes and I am out. When I returned to the stove, I found the kitchen empty. Jake was busy at the grill, so I leaned over the stove and lifted the lid. Steam billowed up in my face. After it cleared, I stared down in victory at the white, fluffy rice. I heard the sliding door to the balcony open and I looked over my shoulder. Rice is ready, I announced cheerfully as Jake came into the kitchen with a platter of delicious-smelling chicken. The timer went off already? He asked. No, I admitted. But I saw it was done and took the lid off. The corner of his mouth twitched as he grabbed a fork from the drawer and came up next to me. He pushed aside the top layer of rice and leaned back to show me. I leaned over the pot, took a look and groaned. Beneath the top layer of rice lay a pile of mushy, wet, soggy grains. Just like Jake had said. "I don't think Casa de Luke will be getting very good online reviews tonight," he joked, nudging me playfully to let me know it was fine. I sighed. Impatient Lucy strikes again. "At least you didn't burn anything," he said, his eyes dancing. "Well, the night is still young," I said, the twinkle in those green eyes lifting my spirits and making me feel less disappointed in my latest cooking disaster. Chapter 9. On Tuesday, I arrived at Jake's loft after a stressful day of work with still no word from my client about the designs I sent him. But as I reached to knock on the door, Jake pushed through the door with a wicker basket tucked under his arm. "Oh," I said, stumbling back in surprise. "I thought we were cooking again tonight, but maybe I got the day wrong." "We are cooking." He smiled before leaning down and giving my cheek a friendly kiss that sent tingles skittering along my skin. "We just have to go grab a few things first. The bikes are over here." I blinked. Bikes? My heart clenched in apprehension at the word. But I sighed in relief as I watched Jake walk over with, not too high-powered, fast-speed motorcycles as I'd expected, but to 2 bicycles, one tan, one mint. Jake strapped down his basket on the back bracket of the larger bike and patted the seat of the smaller bike. He grinned. "Hop on." "Where are we going?" I asked. "Like I said, to get a few things." I raised an eyebrow. "From the grocery store?" He tilted his head contemplatively from side to side. "Sure, you could call it that." I hesitated. "Wouldn't the car be faster?" He laughed and again patted the seat of the mint cruiser. "Trust me, Miss Impatient. The ride will be worth it. Hop on." Okay, with no idea whatsoever where we were going, I swung my leg over the bike. We rode side by side in the warm late afternoon sun along noisy streets until we finally reached quiet neighborhoods and then rode completely out of the hustle and bustle of the city. After several miles, I started to relax and enjoy the view. Sweeping fields with speckles of wild flowers and then groves of trees soon replaced buildings and concrete. 30 minutes later, we turned onto a gravel path amid the whisper of trees and the babble of a small brook just past a hand-painted sign announcing Bennett Family Farms. A fluffy white sheepdog greeted us as we parked our bikes next to a vintage pickup truck with the back converted into a beautiful flower garden. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and then scratched behind the happy dog's ear as he gave Jake slobbery kisses. "The grocery store doesn't have this, now does it?" Jake asked, smiling as he stood and slipped his fingers between mine. "Very true," I said, noticing how perfect my hand felt in his. He lifted the basket from his bike and we walked around to the back of a white farmhouse with a large front porch where customers browsed through tables of local honey, essential oils, soaps, jams, and even some beaded necklaces and earrings. Behind the house were rows of homegrown fruits and vegetables on the farm. "So," Jake said, grinning down at me. "What are you hungry for?" "You," I wanted to answer. Instead, I shrugged. "I don't know." For the next hour, we wandered hand in hand down rows of ripe, plump tomatoes, fragrant bundles of basil, thyme, and mint, thistles of blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries, all juicier and sweeter than the last. Jake plucked samples of each, unable to stop himself like a kid in a candy store. I couldn't help but smile at him. The sun filtered through the leaves of lemon trees and warmed our cheeks as we chatted quietly in the serenity of nature on our way back toward the farmhouse. Jake paid for the fruits and vegetables, along with mozzarella made from the milk of the farm's goats, and I thought we were finished. But when I moved back toward the bikes, Jake stopped me. "Where do you think you're off to?" Our interlaced hands were between our outstretched arms. We hadn't let go of each other the entire time. Even though I'd never been much for public displays of affection, my hand felt natural in Jake's and I couldn't force myself to pull away. I nodded toward the bikes. "Aren't we going to go cook now?" "Of course," he said. My confusion grew as my eyebrow arched higher. "Well, then we have to get back to the kitchen," I said slowly. "You know, that thing with the stove and pots and pans and oven too, like, cook stuff." He shook his head. "Our kitchen is this way." "What are you up to?" I asked, finding my heart pounding in anticipation as he guided me back toward the lawn where he stopped, set down his wicker basket and groceries, and then laid out a large red and white checkered blanket. He swept his hand over it and grinned. "Our kitchen." "I don't get it," I said. "We're going to cook." He sat down and patted a spot next to him. I watched as he pulled a bottle of Chardonnay from the basket along with 2 glasses, a wooden cutting board, and a paring knife. I was still standing as he handed me a glass of crisp, cool wine. "Don't we need a stove?" I asked as I finally sat next to him. "It's a very complicated recipe I'm teaching you this evening, Lucy," he explained. "Only the best chefs in the world can master this dish. Don't be nervous. I just wanted to warn you." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, the corners of my mouth twitching. I took a sip of wine, the cool liquid running down my throat. He pulled out a baguette from the basket and began to slice it. I watched as he then did the same to the mozzarella and tomatoes. He stacked them on the slices of baguette and topped each with a big leaf of basil and a drizzle of olive oil, salt, and pepper. He dragged the back of his hand against his forehead and sighed. "Phew, that was hard," he said, and flopped back in pretend exhaustion. I laughed and shoved him playfully. "That's not cooking." He sat up and handed me a piece from the wooden cutting board. "I cooked so hard for you, and where's my thank you?" Impulsively, I gave him a peck on the cheek. When my lips brushed his skin, my tummy flipped in a way that made me lightheaded. "Thank you, Jake. Even though you're supposed to be teaching me to cook," I reminded him. "With a thank you like that, I'll cook for you every day." "Sounds fun," I said, reminding myself that these cooking lessons were so I could impress another man. But it was so hard to think about anyone else when I was with Jake. So, I crunched into the simple bruschetta and sighed happily as the tomatoes burst with tangy freshness and the mozzarella melted in my mouth. Finally, the basil and olive oil finished it all off perfectly. It tasted like sun and summer and long afternoons without a care in the world. I grinned. "This is delicious." "I'm glad you like it," he said, and then took a piece for himself. When you have fresh and natural ingredients, the cooking does itself. When it's right, everything just falls into place. I nodded as I stared at the last evening rays of sun illuminating the luscious valley before noticing out of the corner of my eye that Jake was watching me. I glanced over at him, taken aback by the way the light played across his sparkling green eyes. "Do you know what I mean?" he asked softly. "Yes." I blushed and quickly looked away, snatching up another bruschetta to avoid expanding on my answer to his question. We ate in silence as we watched the colors of the sunset begin to stretch across the wide blue sky. After we finished, Jake pulled out the strawberries we'd picked together and a jar of whipped cream he made this morning. He dipped a bright, juicy strawberry into the whipped cream and looked over at me. "May I?" he asked. I hesitated only slightly before nodding. I forgot to breathe as Jake guided the strawberry toward my lips. It was everything sweet and lovely and tender in one bite. "You have a bit of cream," he whispered as he moved closer to me on the blanket in the delicate light of the sunset. "Right there at the corner of your mouth." I lifted a finger to my mouth as he watched intently. "Did I get it?" I asked, my voice no louder than the wind through the trees. He shook his head. He was so close I could see his dark eyelashes sweeping across his tan skin. My heart was pounding as I tried the other side. Now? He shook his head again, moving in even closer. May I? He asked, his breath soft against my lips as his eyes searched mine. Yes, I swallowed heavily as my eyes fluttered closed, but I could still see every brilliant color of the sunset painted across the dark canvas of my eyelids as Jake's warm, soft lips pressed delicately against mine. I melted into his kiss just like the fresh whipped cream on the strawberry melted against my tongue. Oh, yes. I knew exactly what Jake meant about what happens when everything is right. He and I were the right ingredients and we fell into place together, kissing softly, sweetly, until he'd completely taken my breath away. Chapter 10. On Wednesday evening, for the first time, I wasn't looking at the clock in the kitchen to see how long I'd be stuck cooking. I wasn't staring at the salted water in the pot, wishing it would hurry up and boil. I wasn't crouched in front of the oven, checking the garlic bread for signs of the elusive golden brown. I wasn't tapping my toe at the simmering cherry tomatoes, urging them to burst already. I wasn't even looking at my phone to see how long it had been since I tossed the tomatoes in with the chopped onions and fresh basil leaves. I wasn't looking at anything in the kitchen but Jake. He leaned against the island counter and I leaned against him, completely unable to see anything other than the dazzling green of his eyes. His hands moved up and down my arms, eliciting goosebumps as I traced circles across the gray t-shirt stretched over his hard chest. My promise to not fall for another hot and spicy pepper on the menu of men was so far out the window, but I didn't even care at the moment, not even the tiniest bit. I liked Jake. I liked him a lot. And right now I couldn't care to think about anything else. His fingers brushed my cheek before lifting my chin so his lips could find mine, just like he'd done on that picnic blanket. This time, he tasted like the Merlot he opened when I arrived earlier that night, rich and delicious. I lost myself in his kiss. I lost myself in the soft touch of his hand at my lower back. I lost myself in his heartbeat against mine, as our chests pressed tightly together. I lost myself in Jake until an alarm went off. And, no, the screeching sound wasn't the one in my head warning me that I wanted stable and reliable, not hot and spicy. I wasn't sure where that alarm had gone, but it was definitely on snooze. The fire alarm that blared in the high ceilings above us was definitely external and hurting my ears. Jake hurried past me to pull the pan of blackened tomatoes off of the heat. He waved his hands over the smoke, laughing as he started making jokes about another fire. I couldn't hear the details, though. My entire focus was on the ruined tomatoes. What had I been thinking? How had I gotten so wrapped up in Jake that I totally missed the potential fire? And I didn't mean the one on the stove. Was it possible that I still hadn't learned my lesson? The longer I stared at the tomatoes, the more upset I grew. Before I knew it, my eyes were watering and I could do nothing to stop them. Lucy? Jake asked, waving a dish towel back and forth in the air. But I just bit my lip, unable to answer him. Whoa, babe, what's going on? He threw the dish towel over his shoulder and leaned down so his face was close to mine. He brushed a hot tear from my cheek. Talk to me, sweetheart. We have to throw them away, I managed to say through a tight, emotion-filled throat. They're ruined. We have to throw them away, I said, staring at the mess of black in the pan. We have plenty more, he said, rubbing my arms. It's all right. It's not fine, though, I said, wiping fresh tears from my eyes. I'm tired of throwing away tomatoes. I'm tired of burning tomatoes. I sniffled and finally looked into Jake's eyes. But I don't want to throw away these tomatoes, I whispered sadly. I liked these tomatoes. I really liked these tomatoes. Lucy, he spoke softly as his gentle green eyes searched mine. This isn't about the tomatoes, is it? It is, I protested. He hesitated and then asked, "Are you sure?" I covered my face with my hands so he couldn't see the tears that were forming again. He gently kneaded the sides of my neck and waited patiently. "Maybe it's not about the tomatoes," I admitted, my voice muffled behind my hands. "Tell me, sweetheart," he said, his voice filled with kindness and concern. "I'm here for you." I parted my fingers and stared at him. Finally, the earnestness in his eyes convinced me. "I used to date exciting, spontaneous, life-loving guys, like you," I said, and then rolled my eyes. That had totally come out wrong, but I needed to go on. They didn't have the most stable jobs or show up to a date-on-time records, but there were sparks. And I liked the sparks. I convinced myself I needed the sparks. He continued to watch me with a dedicated focus. "And?" "The last guy I dated owned a motorcycle," I said, sniffling. "He would take me on rides and I would hold on to him and feel the wind against my face, and I never wanted it to end." The sensation was exhilarating. A line formed between his brows, but he nodded. "Go on." We went on a day ride into the country one beautiful Saturday, not a cloud in the sky, I continued, trying to keep myself from crying even more. Then a storm came out of nowhere. His hand tightened on my arm. "What happened, Lucy?" I shuddered, remembering that day. In our hurry to get home, he took a turn too tightly and we skidded off the slick road. The screech of tires played in my ears and my stomach roiled. Neither of us was seriously hurt, just some scratches and bruises. Thank goodness. But the motorcycle wouldn't start and our cell phones were out of range and it was pouring rain. He pulled me against him, his mouth close to my ear. "I'm glad you were all right." I squeezed my eyes shut to repel the memory from my mind, the bone-chilling rain, the earth-quaking thunder, the dying sputter of the engine. Then I opened my eyes and peered into Jake's green eyes. I've never felt so helpless, so out of control. Living life like that will always burn you eventually. And for what? Some guy who didn't work out anyway. I need to focus on the calm and steady. I never want to lose control like that again. He nodded slowly, a vacant look in his eyes as if he understood that whatever had started between us was over, that it had to be. I was about to grab my purse and leave when he went to the stove. He turned off the boiling water and switched off the other burner. He grabbed the pan of burnt tomatoes and I expected him to walk to the trash can. But he didn't. Instead, he turned to me. The corner of his mouth hitched upward and a twinkle lit up his eyes. "Do you like nachos?" he asked. I wiped under my eyes and blinked. "What?" "Nachos," he repeated. "Do you like nachos, Lucy?" "Loaded nachos?" "Yes," I answered slowly. "Well, then you're in luck that this happened," he said, snapping his fingers. "Because it's a little-known fact that loaded nachos are best with burnt tomatoes. People in the know call this the secret magic ingredient." I sniffed and looked over at him. "Really?" "Fact." He held out his hand to me. "Do you trust me?" he asked. I stared at his hand for a moment. Then I reached out and put my hand in his. We loaded a baking tray with tortilla chips and added ground beef, cheese, lots of cheese, sliced black olives, and pickled jalapenos. Then on top we layered the burnt tomatoes, our fingers brushing up against one another. As we waited on the balcony, we looked out at the tower bridge while the nachos baked. Jake slipped his fingers between mine. "You know, Lucy," he said, looking over at me with a serious expression. "Just because something is a little burned, a little imperfect, a little unlike what you expected when you started, doesn't mean you have to throw it out. I took a deep breath and thought about what he was saying. Thought about all of the fears I was having. Then I looked into those green eyes and the fears faded further and further away until I nodded and then rested my head against his shoulder. That's how the greatest things in life can happen, he whispered, caressing my hair. From a wonderfully messy and sometimes a little burnt accident. Do you really think so? I asked. Yes, because an accident brought me to you. I said, burrowing my head in the comfort of his neck. In the end, the nachos with burnt tomatoes weren't what I'd set out to make. But they were exactly what I was meant to make. Because they were perfect. And we'd made them together. Chapter 11. At work the next afternoon, I refreshed the email inbox and still no new messages from my client. It had been days since I sent in my graphic design and still nothing. If it hadn't been for Jake, I would be losing my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I lazily clicked refresh and sighed contentedly, remembering our kisses from last night. A few minutes later, I clicked again, while I pictured his beautiful green eyes. My mind wandered as I thought about the burnt tomatoes, which had been so delicious in the nachos. I'd fallen for my hot and spicy pepper, but just like the burnt tomatoes, everything would be better with Jake than I'd ever imagined. The ringing of my work phone yanked me out of my daydreaming and I reached over to answer it after clutching at my startled heart. This is Lucy. Hi, Lucy. This is Lance Peterson from the Sacramento Fire Department. We met at your apartment and then again when you dropped off the cookies. Remember? I grinned as I adjusted the phone against my ear so I could continue to refresh my emails in case one came in from my client. I know what you're calling about, Lance, I said. I frowned at the computer screen, no new emails. Whatever. You do? Lance's confused voice came through the line. How could you? You're obviously calling about Krista, I said, grinning as I remembered the look on Krista's face when I told her about running into Lance at the fire station. I told her you said hi. Don't worry. She remembers you for sure. I hadn't refreshed my emails in about 2 seconds, so I clicked my mouse again. Why not? Yeah. I am interested in your friend, but... I know, I said, shaking my head. You want me to rush things along for you. Set you two up on a date right away. Actually. But you have to be patient, Lance, I said, a slow smile stretching across my face. Patience is a tough thing to learn. I've been struggling with it myself, if I'm being honest. But if Krista is right for you, she'll give you a call if you leave me your number. Lucy, I'm not. I mean, she could be the ripe tomato, bright and cheerful and wonderful, to your crunchy baguette, and maybe she's not, you know? Huh? I have no idea what you're talking about, he said, his voice dropping an octave. But, listen, Maybe I'm not explaining myself right, I said, clicking refresh again. Jake knows how to say it better, but what I mean is that Krista is sweet, fresh whipped cream, and maybe you're her strawberry. But, then again, maybe you're just a pickle who needs to wait patiently for his ham. A pickle and a ham? How could he not understand what I was saying? Jake understood me perfectly. But that's because he was right for me and I was right for him. Okay, I said, deciding to try again. Let me put it this way, Lance. What are your 2 favorite pizza toppings? Lucy, I'm calling to tell you that Jake is in the hospital. A bomb went off in my stomach and my finger froze in midair, my cursor suspended over the refresh button to my email inbox. I suddenly didn't care at all about whether or not my client emailed me back. I stared at the beige phone on my desk and the blinking light of the line I was on, which flashed over and over as all of the air left the room. What did you say? I asked, my voice sounding like a small squeak. The sun was shining outside my office window and there wasn't a cloud in sight. But in my gut, I heard the low rumble of thunder. I had taken off my sweater, but now pulled it tight around my shoulders. Jake is where? I asked, unsure if Lance had heard my quiet voice the first time. Unsure whether I had even managed to speak aloud or if it had all been in my head. The office spun all around me. Jake. My sweet Jake. There was an accident at a call today. He's in the hospital. He wanted me to tell. Which hospital? I asked, my heart racing. What's that? Which hospital is he at? I asked, raising my voice this time so he could hear me. I grabbed my purse and hurried toward the door, the cord of the phone stretched out behind me and yanking me backward. Which hospital, Lance? Just tell me, I barked. Marmaduke Medical Center. But, Lucy, listen. I dropped the phone and sprinted out the door. 20 minutes later, I almost ran into the automatic doors at the entrance to Marmaduke Medical Center Hospital because they were taking too long to open. I shoved at them before slipping inside and rushing to the front desk past a line of people. An insane degree of worry drove me to lean over the counter and interrupt the receptionist on the phone, something I would otherwise never dare to do. There's a Jake Bryant here and I need to see him, I said, my voice louder than I intended. My heart raced and my mind went through all kinds of horrible scenarios about how badly Jake was hurt. Was his life in danger? Was he just injured? How bad was the injury? All of the possibilities made me sick to my stomach. A man at the back of the line shouted up at me, "Hey, lady, there's a line." I gave him an apologetic look before turning back to the receptionist. Look, this is really important, I said, staring at the man who was plugging his ear and talking in a low tone into the receiver in front of me. Sir? Please. His name is Jake Bryant and he's a firefighter and all I know is that there was an accident. Line, lady, the man again shouted. Get to the end of the line. A few grumbles joined him this time. I just have to see him, I insisted, my heart racing and my gut tightening. Please, just give me a room number and I'll go. L-I-N-E, line. I was trying my best to hold back my emotions as the woman behind me put a hand on my shoulder. Hang in there, honey, she said, leaning toward the receptionist. Can't you help her real fast? She's obviously distraught. Tears pricked at my eyes as I threw the woman an appreciative look. Finally, the receptionist covered the phone with his hand and looked up at me with tired eyes. Your name? Lucy Remington. Relation? I frowned. What do you mean? He sighed. What is your relation to the patient? Sister? Wife? I shook my head. No, I'm just his girl, I'm just a friend is all. The receptionist shook his head. Only family is allowed back to see that patient, he informed me. I'm afraid you'll have to wait out here, ma'am. The receptionist returned to his phone call as I started to protest, but I stopped suddenly when someone laid a gentle hand on my arm. I turned to find a different woman standing near me, who had deep, forest green eyes and brown hair that looked very familiar. Did you say your name was Lucy Remington? She asked. Yes. I fought to blink away the threatening tears and nodded. Her face looked so familiar and yet I was having a hard time placing how I knew her. But I had definitely seen this woman before, somewhere. Where was it? As I continued to stare at the woman she asked, Are you Jake's Lucy? But I barely heard her question as the answer dawned on me. You're the woman from the television show, I said, my voice rather loud. What's it called? What's it called? Twice the spice, the woman said, wearing a proud smile. Jake must have shown some episodes to you. Jake must have shown me? I shook my head as my mind whirled. You know him? She laughed, and the melody of her laugh sounded familiar to my ears. I'm Tiffany Bryant, Jake's mother. Suddenly, I could see Jake perfectly in her kind green eyes, her sweet voice, and her fun-loving personality. It was all there, just like him. I've heard a lot about you, Lucy, she said, squeezing my arm. It's nice of you to come. I'm sure Jake would like to see you. The reality of the situation came crashing back as I remembered why I was standing there in the hospital reception area in the first place. My voice cracked as I said, I'm not allowed to see Jake, because I'm not family. Tiffany winked at me and grabbed my hand. Got to crack a few eggs in life to make an omelet, my dear. I didn't tell her omelets weren't exactly my forte, but I felt grateful as she led me through the swinging doors. As we drew closer to Jake's room, I grew more nervous. It was the motorcycle accident all over again. I felt out of control. And there was nothing I could do about it. But this time I felt 10 times worse, because it was Jake. My sweet Jake. Tiffany stopped outside a door and rubbed my arm. He's just inside. Go on in. Thank you, I said, giving her a small nod. I held my breath, turned the door handle, and then went in, not knowing what to expect. Chapter 12. My fingers shook and the blood rushed in my ears as the door to Jake's hospital room clicked shut behind me. Inside, I saw him lying on a clean, crisp white bed, eyes closed. His firefighter's helmet sat on the chair in the corner of the room. I scanned his body for injuries, fearing the worst as I tiptoed inside. I didn't see any tubes in his nose or bandages around his head or in his arm. There were scratches on his cheek, though, and a white boot on his left foot. Some kind of monitor was attached to his pointer finger, and there was a steady beeping coming from a nearby machine as his chest rose and fell. At the sound of my heels on the white linoleum, he opened his eyes. Lucy, his eyes widened in surprise. What are you doing here? He sat up as I stopped a few feet from the bed and stared at him, my chin trembling. My eyes flew to the bright green spikes on the monitor by his bed. I had no idea what they meant, but I watched them as if trying to decipher whether or not he was all right. I thought something terrible happened to you, I managed to say, though not very loudly. You're a firefighter, and I was told there was a call and that you were hurt. I wasn't even sure you'd survive. I'm fine, sweetheart. He tried to turn toward me more, but winced as he moved the leg in the boot. Didn't Lance call you? He asked, sagging back against the pillows. I nodded, feeling numb in the sterile, white hospital room. He told me you were in the hospital and I panicked. Hey, now, he said, his voice gentle as tears sprang to my eyes. He reached out his hand, but I just shook my head, standing frozen in the middle of the room as a tear slid down my cheek. Just listen, okay? He used one of those calm tones that had soothed me in the past. I asked Lance to call you because I wasn't going to be able to make our cooking lesson tonight. That's all he was supposed to say because I didn't want to worry you. I'm fine, okay? I'm just fine. But your mom is here, I choked out, gesturing behind me. I met her in the lobby. I mean, if your mom is here then it must be serious, right? I asked, my throat tightening as all the emotion I had been holding onto started to release. She's here to drive me home. That's all, he said, his answer coming out in a hurry. I can't drive with my ankle like this. Sweetheart, trust me. I'm fine. He tried to reach for me, but I remained where I was, shaking my head. Lance said you got hurt on a call. It was just a simple accident, he said, letting out a frustrated sigh. I pushed myself too hard and sprained my ankle. Not my finest moment. My body started trembling. Just a sprained ankle? Yes, it's a bad sprain, but just a sprain, all right? Lucy, come here. I wiped tears from my eyes and shook my head. I'm glad you're okay, I said, relief sweeping through me followed by dread. But I can't do this anymore. His hand dropped and a line formed between his eyebrows. Do what? I wiped a tear away, but another came to take its place. When I heard you were in the hospital, I felt so helpless. I was stuck at a red light on the way over and there wasn't anything I could do to help you and it tore me apart. I felt like I was being ripped into a million pieces. I felt completely out of control. I'm fine, he said, his eyes softening. Just come over here and let me hold you. I promised myself the night of that motorcycle accident that I would never let myself feel so helpless ever again, I said, swallowing heavily. I would stay in control, from then on. Please, stop. Don't do this. His words made my heart ache, but I told myself it would only hurt for a little while. And it wouldn't hurt nearly as much as it would when one day Jake wasn't all right. I needed calm and stable, not a firefighter who jumped in and out of dangerous situations. I looked up to find Jake struggling to swing his legs over the bed. Pain etched lines across his face as he did so and it felt like daggers in my chest. Stop, Jake, I whispered. No, he gritted out through clenched teeth. You stop it. You're not throwing us away, just like you throw everything away. Your impatience isn't going to end this just when it's getting started. I'm sorry, I said, shaking my head. It's just not for me. We're perfect for each other and you know it, he said, his brow furrowing. You're so fast to throw things out when they just need a little work. Things aren't always going to go exactly according to your plan. Life isn't a color-coded grocery list. I have to get out of here, I said, taking a step back. I'm sorry, Jake. Thanks for all of your help. Really. I won't forget it, or you. Jake put weight on his bad ankle and tried to push to his feet. Every second longer I was in here, I was hurting him. I had to go. I had to go now. Goodbye, I said, shoving the door open and only managing to hold back my tears halfway down the hall. Then they started streaming down my cheeks. I hurried out of the hospital because I knew there was nothing they could do for the pain that ripped at my heart. There was nothing anyone could do. The next morning, I woke up exhausted. I'd hardly slept, nodding off here and there, wanting to call Jake, but knowing that wasn't a good idea. Not even a double shot of espresso from Courtney's coffee cart could help the bags under my eyes. My stomach growled as I walked into the office because I had avoided my kitchen entirely that morning. I wasn't sure my nerves could handle seeing a stove, not even for long enough to grab a banana from the counter. As I booted up my computer, I stared at the black screen, seeing the scene from Jake's hospital room replay over and over again, especially the part with Jake lying there hurt. My heart squeezed and I wondered how he was doing. I was already an emotional mess, and so it shouldn't have come as a surprise when I checked my empty inbox with still no message from my client. Frustrated, I opened a new message and my fingers flew across the keyboard. As I typed, Jake's voice floated through my head, saying, "Just because something is a little burned, a little imperfect, a little unlike what you expected when you started, doesn't mean you have to throw it out." I'd thrown Jake out. Things got hard and I'd just thrown him out. I shook my head, trying to clear those thoughts and focus on work. Finally, I finished my email. Dear Mr. Garrett, I have been waiting for a response regarding my work for several days now. Is there something wrong with the graphic designs I sent you? Did you not like them? If they weren't to your satisfaction, I can redo them. I can totally throw all of that out and redo them for you. I await your response. Best regards. Lucy. After skimming over what I typed, I hovered the mouse over the send button. I was about to click the mouse when my computer dinged and a new email arrived to my inbox. I scanned the sender to find it was an email from Mr. Garrett. My fingers shook as I moved the cursor across the screen. I hesitated before opening the email, afraid of his response. Squeezing my eyes shut, I inhaled, exhaled, and then finally clicked to open it. Ms. Remington. Apologies for the delay. I was so blown away by your work that I wanted to show it to our CEO, who has a very busy schedule as you can imagine. We're developing a national campaign and we both agreed you'd be perfect to spearhead it. I'd love to discuss this opportunity with you in more detail if you're interested. Let's set up a time to talk. Peter. He'd signed it, Peter? Not Mr. Garrett? Joy flowed through me. Every time I reread the email, my smile grew even bigger. Finally, I sagged back into my chair, grinning from ear to ear. Jake had been right. I'd only needed some patience, just like the omelet, the rice, and the burnt tomatoes. Maybe it was because I was sleep-deprived or dehydrated or starving. Maybe it was because Courtney's coffee had gone to my head. Or maybe it was because I missed Jake like crazy already and had serious misgivings about breaking things off with him yesterday. But whatever the reason, I found myself reaching for the phone and dialing his number to tell him the good news and that he'd been right. As I punched his number into my desk phone, an incoming phone call interrupted me. My heart leaped in my chest. Was it Jake calling? I glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Tom, the accountant. I tried to remind myself that Tom was exactly the kind of guy I should date. Immediately, memories flooded my mind of Jake's arms slung over my shoulder, his hand at my lower back, and his fingers intertwined with mine. My stomach knotted as I answered the phone. Hello? Hi, Lucy. It's Tom. I'm back in town, he said, his voice upbeat. I forced a smile on my face, hoping that would make my voice sound the opposite of how I felt. Great. How was the conference? He chuckled and I couldn't help but compare it to the sound of Jake's laughter, which had always brought a smile to my face. I thought about how much I already missed Jake's laughter. Oh, Tom said. Too many accountant jokes, not enough time. Right, I said, feeling deflated. I blamed my lack of sleep, but knew it wasn't that. So, listen, he said. I wanted to give you a quick call to make sure we're still on for dinner tonight. I glanced at the calendar on my computer. Yes, it was Thursday. I was supposed to cook dinner for Tom. I'd almost forgotten this was the reason I had been spending time with Jake in the first place. But there were no more days with Jake. No Thursday evenings or Fridays nights or Sunday mornings. No Saturday afternoons with strawberries and fresh cream. I'd taken my cooking lessons and it was time to move forward with my life. Yeah, Tom, I finally answered. We're on. Chapter 13. Tom came over to my place that night and everything went exactly according to plan, just like I'd spelled out with my color-coded pens in my journal. In every way possible, it was precisely what I expected, entirely what I imagined, perfectly what I needed. Tom arrived on time, wearing a nice, clean, crisp suit, holding a bouquet of flowers in the crook of his arm and an expensive bottle of French wine in his hand. He kissed me on the cheek very sweetly and asked me about my day very kindly. Check. He wore socks and there wasn't a bare toe or flip-flop in sight. Check. He offered to help as I cooked and still joined in when I politely insisted he should relax on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. Check. Soft jazz played as I sautéed the onions, which I didn't burn. I added the cherry tomatoes that I swore weren't as bright as the ones I cooked with Jake and nothing caught on fire. The basil didn't fill the kitchen with the sweet aroma like it did with Jake, but I didn't reduce it to a crisp either. The sauce ended up just fine. We chatted easily and comfortably while I stirred the pasta in the boiling water that didn't scald anyone. I didn't overcook the spaghetti, and I didn't undercook it. The spaghetti came out just fine. Just fine. I intended to make a simple marinara sauce with the spaghetti, and a simple marinara sauce with spaghetti was what I made. Check. Tom and I sat at my dining room table like I planned, we smiled at each other like I imagined, and we each finished our plates like I hoped. There were no fire alarms, no billows of black smoke, and no flashing red lights outside my townhouse. There was no sudden change of plans, no unexpected disaster, no unintentional burned tomato nacho plate that I dreamed of the next night. It was all smooth, easy, steady. It was what I wanted. But as I swirled another fork full of spaghetti and listened to Tom tell a story from his accounting conference, I couldn't help but wonder if I knew what I wanted at all. And so I said, "Excellent," and the whole room just erupted into laughter. What am I missing? I interrupted, looking up from my dinner to Tom. He paused with his fork halfway raised to his mouth. "What's that?" he asked, clearly a little confused. "Did you not get the joke? It's a pun on the software called Excel." "No, not the joke," I said, shaking my head. "I mean, the pasta. It's missing something." "What didn't I put in?" Tom frowned and studied his plate. "I think it's just fine, Lucy." I pushed back my chair. "Yes, it is." "That's it exactly." Tom seemed startled by my outburst. "Are you okay?" "That's all this dinner is," I continued, lifting up a tangle of spaghetti. "It's just fine. It's missing something to make it great." "Don't you want great, Tom?" "I know I do. This sauce needs spice, right? Should I put some spice in it?" I pushed back my chair to go search my cabinets. Surely I had a packet of chili flakes from takeout somewhere. But before I stood up, Tom laughed and squeezed my hand from across the table. "Lucy, I like it just the way it is," he said, keeping me in place. "You followed the recipe, right?" I sank back into my chair and nodded. "Yeah, I followed it perfectly." "Well, then," he said, giving me a smile. "I'm sure it turned out exactly how it's supposed to then." "Thank you." "So, like I was saying," I said, "excellent," and the whole place went crazy like I was some sort of rock star and... I stared down at the plate in front of me that looked just like the plate in the picture for the recipe, and Tom jumped back into his story. "I wanted so terribly for this date to go the way I wanted, because then I could convince myself that I was right to end things with Jake. If everything went perfectly, then I would be able to sleep knowing I'd made the right decision. The problem was that my date was going exactly like I'd planned, but I still had feelings for Jake. I missed him. And no matter how nice Tom was or how perfect the date had gone, it would never be perfectly imperfect like it had been with Jake. Maybe in my rush to get what I planned, I didn't even give myself enough time to consider what I truly wanted in the first place. At the end of the night, I walked down the street with Tom to his car. "Well," Tom said, unlocking his car and opening his door. "Thanks for the nice evening." I'd dated enough to know that a date that ended in nice was not a success. I wasn't hurt, though. I felt the same way. "It was great meeting you, Tom," I said. "You, too, Lucy," he said. I watched as he got in his car, pulled away from the curb, and his red taillights disappeared down the street. That was the end of my perfect date, which, shocker of shocks, was a disaster. Not ready to go back inside, I walked down the street to clear my head. I happened across Courtney Carmichael, who was closing up her coffee cart for the night. "Hi, Courtney," I said, feeling deflated. "Hi, Lucy." She beamed at me and I noticed her sequin shirt that spelled out "Got Beans" in brown sparkly letters. "Where's that cutie of yours?" I fought back the wave of emotion that brought tears to my eyes. "Jake isn't mine anymore." Courtney stopped packing up and pulled me into a tight hug. "Here, I have just the thing for heartbreak," she said, ducking under the cart and emerging with a can of whipped cream. "Right down the hatch." I laughed sadly and took the can. "How is this going to help?" "Trust me," she said, smiling and nodding. "Okay," I said, ready to try anything to get rid of this ache in my chest. So, I swallowed a big mouthful of whipped cream and looked back at Courtney. "Better?" "I wish." I licked my lips and smiled at her, appreciating her efforts to try and cheer me up. After swallowing another mouthful, I sighed. It was going to take a lifetime of whipped cream to make me feel even a little better. I thought I knew what I wanted, Courtney. I was so sure of it, and now your plan backfired. Courtney reached over to pat my arm. "Let life surprise you, Lucy," she said. "Be patient and things will fall into place." "Look at me," she grinned, patting the counter of her coffee cart. I thought I wanted to be a high-powered attorney and I turned out miserable. Now I'm literally making the lives of people I care about sweeter with a cup of coffee and some whipped cream. I'm happy. I nodded. "This stuff does taste pretty good," I said, looking at the can. She winked over at me. "Tastes even better with the right person to share it with. Don't you think?" An image of Jake's smiling face popped into my head, giving my belly a little tingle. But he hadn't been smiling the last time I'd seen him. He hadn't been smiling at all. I only wished there was something I could do about it. Chapter 14. Sitting alone on my couch on Friday, I finally caught up with messages I'd missed during my whirlwind romance with Jake and subsequent crash and burn. There was a text from my mom saying that my brother and Hannah were going to be at the country club's charity dinner next weekend and she wondered if I was bringing a date. I responded with, "Only if a pint of ice cream counts as a date." There were texts from Jennifer with pictures of Dylan and her on their honeymoon in Maui. I sent a smiley face on the phone while trying to hold back tears in real life. I felt so happy for Jennifer, but her love reminded me of what I'd almost had and lost. Then there was a series of texts from Krista earlier that week that I somehow missed entirely. "Missy is driving me crazy." "Lucy, I'm drowning in pink." "I'm moving." "That's it. I'm moving." Chuckling to myself, I quickly typed out, "Never fear. I'm on my way over." After slipping on some sneakers and grabbing my laptop to search for listings, I got into my car and headed toward Krista's apartment. As I knocked on the door, I cringed, fully expecting to walk into chaos. I expected lines drawn across the living room to mark out each of their space. But as I stood at the door, I frowned when I heard soft music playing and the sound of laughter inside and not crashing and banging and bella bow cries. I knocked again when no one came to answer. "Hello?" I called, rapping my knuckles against the wood. "Krista? Missy? Lucy?" Missy answered, calling from inside. I leaned toward the door. "Yeah. Lucy, it's open," Krista shouted. "Come on in." With a deep breath, I opened the door and peeked my head inside, ready for a bottle of bikini wax to shatter on the wall next to me. But inside there were no dividing lines, no mess, and no chaos. So, I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. My two friends were sitting on the floor in the living room facing the TV with a bottle of wine, a bowl of popcorn, and bags of chocolate candies and red licorice scattered amongst them. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling like I was walking into a trap. "Nothing, just hanging out." Krista looked over her shoulder and smiled at me. "We're painting each other's nails." "Get over here. You're next." I walked over to them and stared down at Krista's pink toenails. "I've never seen you with painted nails, Krista." She grinned up at me. "They're cute, right?" she asked, as she wiggled her toes before returning to painting messy hearts on Missy's nails. Cute wasn't a word I heard from Krista either. "What are you watching, Missy?" I asked, glancing toward the television. "Isn't it obvious, Lucy?" Missy in her normal pearls, fluffy pink pearls, and perfectly curled hair raised an eyebrow up at me. "It's soccer." Krista is obsessed with Megan Rapinoe. I don't know too much about the game, but the gal does have a fabulous sense of fashion. I stared at the screen and then at Missy and then back at the screen. It was obvious: green field, goals, soccer ball. I knew it was soccer. What I didn't understand was why Missy was watching it and seeming to watch it willingly. "These women are amazing, aren't they?" Krista asked, smiling at Missy. "They are very impressive," Missy said, staring at the game in awe. "Guess what, Lucy? Krista promised to teach me how to play this weekend, which will be great exercise. I'll be scoring home runs in no time." "That's baseball, Missy," Krista said, laughing. "Whatever." Missy shrugged, raising a manicured nail. "Touchdowns then. I'd like to say you're making progress. But, not so much." Krista chuckled as she focused on painting Missy's pinky. "You've got a ways to go with sports, girl." I leaned over and whispered to Missy, "Is she blackmailing you?" Missy was the girliest of girly girls, and the closest I'd ever seen her get to grass was for a champagne brunch picnic. Missy dismissed me with a wave and laughed. "You're too funny, Lucy." I stared between the two of them in disbelief. "Why aren't you guys arguing?" I asked, wiggling my finger back and forth between them. "I got the craziest text from you this week, Krista. You said you were moving. Ring any bells? I even came over here to help you find a new place." Krista laughed. "Lucy, that message was from days ago." Missy looked up at me and nodded. We sat down and talked and realized we were both being a little too controlling. We each wanted the place to be exactly the way we wanted it, but after some patience. "A lot of patience," Krista corrected with a wink. "Fine, after a lot of patience," Missy said, smiling over at me. We came to see that the apartment and our relationship could be way better if we each were a little more flexible. "Okay, that makes sense," I said, nodding and feeling like I'd entered uncharted territory. "Oh, hey, Lucy," Krista said, grabbing the remote. "I've been watching that cooking show you and I found a couple weeks ago. You know, Twice the Spice? It's much more entertaining than Cooking Basics 101. I really think you'd like it if you just gave it a chance. It's on now." "What about the game?" I asked, not wanting to see Jake's mom, which would remind me of the pain I felt from losing Jake. "It's fine," Krista said, clicking the remote, and then Twice the Spice came on. I gasped when I saw that it wasn't just Tiffany on the screen. Jake was on TV, too. A flag at the bottom of the screen flashed live in Sacramento as a studio audience cheered to the tune starting the show. "Hey," Krista said, pointing at the screen. "Isn't that the hot firefighter you've been seeing?" Missy turned to me. "You've been seeing a firefighter?" "Yes," I admitted, gaping at the screen. Tonight I have a very special guest, everyone, Tiffany said, waving a bright turquoise silk-clad arm in the air. This is my son, Jake, and he has a brand new recipe to share with us tonight. Take it away, Jake. My heart fluttered seeing him on the screen, but my legs went weak. I dropped into a chair, my eyes glued to the TV as Jake smiled at the camera, his green eyes seeming to pierce right through me. He rested his crutches against the kitchen counter on set. This is a very special recipe to me, he said, and I clung to his every word. I wasn't trying to make this when I discovered it. In fact, it's quite the opposite of what I was trying to make. It was a mistake, actually. Sometimes, the happiest times come out of the biggest mistakes. I stood and moved closer to the screen, so I could see him even better as if we were facing each other in real life. Lucy, hey! Missy complained. I shushed her, waved a hand behind me, and leaned forward to hear what Jake was saying. It was the kind of mistake that I now hope to keep making over and over again, he said, with a casual shrug. Because it created something special, something totally original and impossible to recreate. I gasped. He was looking straight into the camera and I got goosebumps because it felt like he was saying all of this specifically to me. Today, I'd like to share with you my special burnt tomato nachos recipe. This delicious meal is a reminder that sometimes life doesn't go the way you thought it would or even the way you wished it would, but, if you let it, life will show you how to end up right where you needed to be all along. Krista and Missy cooed behind me along with the studio audience as Jake started to next list the necessary ingredients. I have to go, I said, grabbing my purse. What? Krista asked as I turned around. Are you going to the studio? Yes, of course I'm going to the studio, I said, slipping my feet back in my heels. Oh, how romantic! Missy squealed. What are you going to do? Krista asked. I have no idea. But I have to hurry. Good luck! Krista shouted after me. But I was already out the door. Chapter 15. Thanks to a quick internet search, a few lucky green lights, and an absolute refusal to listen to my brain shouting nonstop about how ridiculous this all was, I pulled to a stop outside the studio where Jake was recording twice the spice, within 23 minutes, a new record, I was sure. I raced across the parking lot before realizing I forgot to turn off my engine. Oops, I said, glancing behind me. My aching, yearning, thudding heart said, leave it. My brain responded, yeah, no, go turn off your car. I gave my brain a win, sprinted back to the car, turned the engine off and then ran toward the doors to the studio. Inside, sat a bored-looking security guard playing on his phone. My mind whirled for a passable cover to get past him. I'm supposed to go in. I'm the caterer for Tiffany Bryant. Okay. Sure, the man mumbled, after briefly looking up. Thanks, I said, hurrying past him and toward a black door with an illuminated green light above it that read, Live. Quietly I slipped inside where I found myself in a dark corridor between two raised sets of bleachers with the studio audience. Straight ahead of me I saw Jake and the sight of him made me freeze halfway down the corridor. For the first time, I considered what could be a very sad outcome of what I was about to do on live TV. What if Jake couldn't forgive me? What if he wasn't willing to give me a second chance? I shouldn't be here without a plan. I needed to get out of here and organize, but my heart said there was no time to waste. Where were my multicolored pens when I needed them? I turned to leave, but then turned back again to stay, and found myself spinning in circles near the stage. Lucy? Jake's voice sent shivers up my spine. I froze, lifted my head, and saw people above me leaning over the bleachers to see who Jake was squinting at against the bright studio lights. My cheeks grew hot as I gave a small, embarrassed wave. Hi, I said, my voice squeaking. I was just, well. I again turned to leave, then spun back around trying to be brave, as the audience stared at me in confusion. Jake moved around the set's kitchen island, coming toward me. You were just going to help us with the special nachos recipe? I raised a shoulder, watching as he held an apron out toward me while balancing on his good foot. There was nothing but kindness and acceptance in his expression. In fact, he looked pretty happy to see me. His green eyes were dancing and his lips turned upward into a hopeful smile. The apron was an invitation to try again, to get back in the kitchen even after burning the place down. It was the do-over I needed to create something special with him that was delicious, spicy, flavorful, and something no one would ever describe as just fine. It was an opportunity to let go of the rules and follow life wherever it led without being afraid. Are you sure? I mouthed. He smiled at me and that smile melted my heart. Get over here, Chef Lucy. Laughing nervously, I walked toward the set as Tiffany got the audience cheering. I smiled up at Jake as he slipped the apron over my head. I'm sorry, I whispered, hoping only he could hear me. Nothing to be sorry about, he said, shaking his head. You were scared. I get it. But you have nothing to be scared about, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I'm glad, I said, my eyes watering. I'm so glad, Jake. The corner of his mouth lifted. Commercial break is in 1 minute. I'm going to do my best to wait until then to kiss you. I sucked a breath, feeling an invisible cord tugging me toward him. That's going to be 1 long minute, I said. He winked down at me and I thought my knees were going to give out right then and there. I turned toward the audience, entirely unsure of what to do now. Welcome, Lucy, Tiffany said, leaning over to see me from the other end of the counter. What spices would you suggest we sprinkle on top of these burnt tomato nachos before we put them in the oven? You want to know what I think? For real? I asked, putting my hands to my chest. You do know that I almost burned down my townhome while trying to make an omelet, right? No, I hadn't heard that, Tiffany said, looking out at the audience. Had you all heard that? No, the audience responded. She raised her eyebrows at the audience. Do you want to hear more stories from Lucy? Yes, they shouted, clapping erupting throughout the room. I do, too, Tiffany said, nodding as if she couldn't wait to hear what else I would say. But first I'd like to hear her advice on spice. Jake was just telling us that you're quite the cook. I laughed. Well, I'm not sure Jake was telling the truth about that. The audience laughed. But I looked up at Jake and behind the counter secretly laced my fingers through his. I answered looking into his eyes the whole time. But I can say that I've learned that the only wrong answer is no spice, I said, and the set became deadly quiet as if they sensed I was about to reveal my heart and soul, which was true. It may take a lot of time to find the right spice for you, folks. It may take some trial and error, and maybe a lot of error. In fact, it might take burning a meal or 2 or 3. The audience began cheering and I grinned, squeezing Jake's hand. He smiled down at me. But everyone deserves spice in their lives, everyone deserves their special, perfect, wonderful flavor, I continued. So be patient, keep trying, and you'll find it. Open your cupboard and try anyone. And then keep trying new flavors. Because there's the right match, the right recipe out there for everyone. Jake's thumb traced circles around my palm as we stared into each other's eyes. Tiffany must have sensed we were lost in each other because she turned to the audience. Wise words, Chef Lucy, she said. How about we try oregano right after this break? The producer announced the commercial break and a moment later Jake's lips were on mine. As his mouth opened, my tongue found his, and butterflies went wild in my belly. I fell against his strong chest and melted into him. He tasted like the only spice I would ever need in life. And he tasted me like he felt the same way. My arm slipped around his neck as we kissed long and sweet, the audience cheering and clapping. And it was perfect. "We're back from commercial break in 10, 9, 8, the producer announced. But Jake only pulled me tighter. His fingers tangled in my hair as his thumbs tilted my head up toward him. I gripped my hands behind his neck and pulled him closer to me. 5 seconds, folks. Hey, Jake, 4 seconds. I had no intention of stopping. And apparently neither did Jake. 3. I love you, he whispered against my lips. 2. I love you, too, I whispered back. And we're live. I think what the producer meant to say as Jake and I continued to kiss on national television was that we were alive. Because every part of me felt alive when I was with Jake. Wonderfully, chaotically, beautifully alive, making me realize the best dish of all was love. The end. You have been listening to Date to the Rescue, Do-Over Date Series, Book 4, by Susan Hatler, copyright 2020 by Susan Hatler, audiobook copyright 2023 by Susan Hatler. Susan Hatler is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author who writes humorous and emotional women's fiction and young adult novels. Many of Susan's books have been translated into German, Spanish, French, and Italian. A natural optimist, she believes life is amazing, people are fascinating, and imagination is endless. She loves spending time with her characters and hopes you do, too.